motion to approve this agenda for tonight.
Mayor, I'll make a motion to approve tonight's meeting, workshop meeting.
Second.
Motion and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Just a reminder, this workshop is online. If those of you via YouTube, washingtoncity.org/meetings. We're going to hear from our hospital administrator, Mitch Cloward. Yearly update.
I think is Steve, the Wizard of Oz, behind the curtain. Steve, you can hear. Oh, he's got it up. This is a good opportunity for us to come once a year and just give you an update on what's happening at the hospital. So thank you for your time. We promise not to take much of it. Steve, can you click 2 more times? Just thought at the beginning of this, we'll go 2 slides after this one. There you go. Thank you. Just a snapshot of what's happening at the hospital as we continue to wade through this pandemic. This is a snapshot of our hospital census. Last Thursday, we get our census report 2 times a day, 6 in the morning and 6 at night. So I wanted to share with you what I saw on my phone that day, which is something we're experiencing almost every day for the last month. We're short 12 nurses and 8 patient care techs. We were caring for 73 COVID patients. The peak last year during the pandemic was 83, so we're about 10 off of our all-time high. The problem is we have all the other populations of patients that are back or caring for, and so therefore, we had a census of 298 patients and we're licensed for 284 beds. The ICU, we had 29 of those 73 COVID patients in our ICU. We have a 32-bed ICU unit and our total ICU census was 44. So for about 3 weeks, our ICU has been 130, 140% capacity. And that's the problem, because if we have a rollover on I-15 or a stroke and your care requires an ICU bed, we just simply don't have one right now. So we're canceling elective surgeries that require an inpatient bed. If we didn't have these 73 COVID patients, would have plenty of capacity at our hospital. So next slide, Steve.
Before you move on from that, was that not the case early on with COVID? Did you not have other things that were feeding into intensive care?
What freed our hospital up from a bed capacity perspective is we didn't have the respiratory illness, the cough, cold, or flu, and people were delaying their care.
Shutting down?
Yeah, everything was shutting down. So now this year we've got everything. COVID plus everything else is hitting us this year.
Thank you.
We appreciate the opportunity to tell our story about what we're seeing in the hospital with our census, but the blue line is the number of COVID patients we're caring for. The solid line is on a 7-day average. And you can kind of see that blue line represents a 7-day average. That dotted blue line represents the actual number of COVID patients we care for. So the 7-day average is lower than the dotted lines, which are actual numbers of patients. You can see we hit 73 and last year it was 83 was our peak. The yellow line is our ICU census and the red line are the number of COVID deaths in our hospital. Next.
So can you explain why the date says 2024?
2024.
Got dates on the bottom and it says 12/5/2024 and then 8/26
Oh,
2025.
Those are supposed to be, that's a November of 2020 and then this year should be 21. So those dates are wrong.
You're predicting a future.
We're not there yet in 25.
I'm hoping we're not there.
Yeah. Yep. Nope. There you go. We hope we don't see that in 25. Yeah.
Okay. Well,
We got down as low as during the trough, 8 patients a day. And we thought we're through this. And then all of a sudden the variant and the unvaccinated bumped us right back up to almost where we were in the peak last year. So this is data from last week as well. We looked at the number of patients that were hospitalized, and the blue dot represents patients that had COVID that were unvaccinated, and the yellow is partially vaccinated, and the green was fully vaccinated. So you can tell, we know the vaccine makes a difference. So next slide. And this looks at the number of COVID deaths 161 from December through August of 21. No one single disease pattern has accounted for that many deaths. So during this time period, 161 people have died from COVID, December through August, and the blue represents unvaccinated, the green vaccinated, and the yellow partially vaccinated. So we are absolute proponents of the vaccine. Next slide. Any questions on COVID before I move away from that? We are not through this. I'm very concerned about our intensivists, our physicians, and our nurses in our ICU. They're tired and burnt out. We're trying to get other ICU nurses from the Intermountain system across the state to come and help support them, but their ICUs are busy too. We have travelers. You pay nurses from across the country to come help you out. We've got that. We're doing everything we can to help give them a reprieve during this time because there's no end in sight in the near term. So
does our rate of COVID cases, is it mirroring the rest of the state, the rest of the region, or are we?
We're above.
We're higher.
We're higher. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Significantly higher.
There's not another ICU in Intermountain system that's 144% capacity, and the sheer number of COVID patients we have is higher as well. So we're a bit of an outlier on the wrong end of that, and we're also an outlier when the percentage of vaccinated patients in Washington County is less than the state average as well. So
you know those numbers off the top of your head, even just
40,
roughly?
Well, I think it was in our county 40-something% are vaccinated. Yeah.
This has died.
Averages between 40 and 50%. So we're paying a price for that. Any other questions about COVID before I move on to the other general hospital updates? I wish I had better news, but it's pretty sobering. Our mission is to help people live the healthiest lives possible. And on the next slide, Steve, we have a governing board, and you may recognize some of these people, but I want to recognize Cindy Gilbert, our board chair. She joined us in that role in May. So a little bit about Cindy Gilbert. She is an attorney. She's corporate counsel for Utah Iron, the newly opened mine west of Cedar City. She's corporate counsel for Gilbert Development and Crusher Rental and Sales. She and her husband Steve own Diamond G Rodeos, where they breed and clone rodeo bulls. And some fun facts about Cindy: she was the first female flank person in the Professional Rodeo Cowboys Association. She's flanked over 20,000 animals, and she still holds an arena record for a high mark bull ride in the National Finals Rodeo in 2001. So whenever Cindy asks for something, we just give it to her. But I do want her to talk a little bit about the board and to introduce you to her since she's new in this role.
That's always hard to follow up, but it is a pleasure. I fly over Washington County weekly as Gilbert Development does an awful lot of dirt work. Brio, what's the apartment complex over on Telegraph Road? We did that. Anyway, several of them, and it's been pretty impressive how you've been increased and grown, and kudos to you. We appreciate it. Obviously, it can't last forever, but we will appreciate it as long as it does. For me, being on the board is an opportunity to give back. We are very grateful to have a hospital that like we do, where when someone gets bucked off a horse or falls off a ledge in Zion or whatever, they're close to a level 2 trauma center. And for as small a community as we are, it also has its downside because we get higher COVID numbers, but it's still an opportunity to be there, to have the best cardiothoracic surgeons, to have good people, and several from your community. I so enjoy Elizabeth Bingham. She just radiates throughout our board and all the things that she's involved in. And I'm not sure who else lives in Washington City, but I know she does and loves it. So it is a board that brings your concerns to that board and tries to represent them. And so as we try to give back, know that we're always there to answer questions or be of help, and I'll wave as we fly by. So thank you for letting us come.
Thanks, Cindy. And Mayor, I want you and the city council to know that as the city proceeds with plans to support a hospital in Washington City, I really want to have a collaborative relationship, because it's an honor to serve the people of this community. And I think that needs to be the foundation of what we do going forward. And I want to make that clear to you and the city council that we're a growing community and we're not always going to be the only hospital in this county. So I want to really form a collaborative, not a really tense competitive relationship, because we're caring for people and we should work together where we can. Although there'll be ways we compete, I hope you can represent that to Stuart and others, that our desire is to collaborate where we can. That's kind of the spirit in this community. All right, next slide. Some of the strategic plans we have is we've been in Hurricane since 2004, and we're planning on building a freestanding emergency department with some imaging capabilities there. Why are we doing that? The mayor, well, they've been petitioning us since 2004 to build a hospital in Hurricane. And the mayor called us back in, 2017, the city council and mayor made it clear that they wanted a hospital in Hurricane. There were signs that went up. 2007, a hospital's coming. We didn't feel like it was the right time. We told them we'd purchase land, build a clinic, and recruit physicians, and we'd watch this over time. So Mayor Bramwell reached out to me and Terry Draper in 2019 and said, it's time, we've got to do something here. And I said, what's driving this? He said, we need access to care 24/7. And to us, that's an emergency department. And so this is the first phase of our hospital in Hurricane, is this freestanding emergency department with imaging services. The next slide. Timeline of our Intermountain Healthcare in Hurricane. Dr. Lass, we purchased his primary care clinic in 2004. We purchased 28 acres in 2005. Opened the Hurricane Clinic in 2006. The mayor, Hershey, back then was really passionate about getting a hospital there in 2007. We didn't commit to do that. Others did. Signs went up. Those signs are now down. So in 2019, we started meeting with the city council again, saying we appreciate the services you offer in Hurricane, but we need more. We need to do more. They would have preferred us to do this years ago. So we did secure land. We broke ground on this facility, and our plan is to occupy it in the end of 2022. But it's right there going to be on the north side of where our existing clinic is. We have 20 acres that we purchased there. The time has not been right until recently to provide those services, but it's not soon enough for the mayor and the city council. Okay, next slide. This is just, you can see where the existing clinic is, and just north of that is where we'll build the hospital. And you can see the shaded part is the phase 1, the ED, and then phase 2 is outlined in green there, where we'll add to that hospital with beds and delivery capabilities and surgery in the future when we feel like the demographics support that. Next slide. We are one of the largest trauma centers in the state of Utah, and it's easier to talk about the services we don't provide than the ones that we do, because the list is comprehensive. Next slide. So what is the role of a trauma center? We're a level 2 trauma center, and you can see at level 1 and level 2 trauma centers, because of the infrastructure that we have there, we save lives. The percentage of people who are critically injured that come to a level 1 or level 2 trauma center, the percentage of people who die precipitously goes down from level 3, 4, or non-designated hospitals. Trauma centers are the anchor for taking care of people who are severely ill or critically injured, and that is our niche. And I think as we think about another hospital coming to town, that's why I think that relationship's important, is because patients that come to the hospital in Washington, some of them are going to need to be seen at a trauma center. And so how we should be interested in working together on how to transfer patients that need higher level of care. I'm really interested in that discussion. How can we work together to make sure patients get the right care at the right time, especially if they need trauma level care? So we want to support that. The next slide is more innovation at our hospital. This is Ernie. He's from Mesquite. He's 86 years old. His mitral valve in his heart was failing him, and we now do this procedure. We do this mitral clip that can hold your valve together, and that's done through a catheter-based procedure. We don't need to crack or open the patient's chest. We can just go through this catheter and take this device and repair the mitral valve with this mitral clip. So he's now going up and down steps without stopping. It's marvelous, and we now have the ability to, once again, innovate in heart care with these mitral clips. So there's more to come with innovation in heart care. Next slide. A few more things. We'll continue to innovate in cardiac services. There's really not hardly anything we don't do other than heart transplants with our heart center. We do about everything else. Next, click the button. We now have pediatricians that only work in the hospital. We now have heart physicians that only care for patients in the hospital. They don't have an outpatient practice. So next slide is spine care. We have a national contract with a national insurance company to bring patients for spine surgery and spine care to our hospital because it's our outcomes are really good and our cost is relatively low. Next slide is cancer care. We are the hub for cancer care for Intermountain Healthcare, and we have a partnership with Stanford University where we're doing research and science in the same building that our oncologists are providing cancer care for our patients. So what is the future of medicine? It took about 10 years to sequence the human genome and cost about $3 billion. We can sequence a person's genes in a day for free. So if you participate in this study, it's free. What are we going to do with that DNA? We are trying to find a genetic variant that's responsible for heart disease or cancer. And our goal is to eradicate it before it ever manifests itself to where we have to cure and treat. The future is eradication through gene sequencing and identifying those genetic variants. And beyond heart care and cancer care, it's finding MS and Alzheimer's and finding those genetic variants and targeting ways to eradicate them before they ever manifest themselves. That is the future of medicine. That work is being done right here in Washington County. And finally, yeah, go ahead.
Mitch, I'm just curious.
Yeah.
How many, I know Dr. Nadal was trying to get to 500,000 people. How close is he?
We probably, I don't know, but the problem was when we started this, COVID hit.
Yeah.
And so I know we're off our target goal, but I don't know. I'd be
Is it
just
starting back
guessing.
up at all?
Oh yeah. Yeah. You can come over there.
'Cause I know
It's
that
safe to come.
They called my wife and they said, we have extra blood. Can we use that for the,
Yeah.
and so.
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
using
I
theirs.
don't know how many we've done, but we're off our target because we're about a year and a half behind because of the pandemic. It's discouraging, but we'll continue to forge ahead. Lincoln's phenomenal. And then finally, healthcare's, when we have a healthcare crisis, it's not convenient. And sometimes we don't want to go to the emergency department. And so we have this next slide, the Connect Care app for around $50. You can just click a button and be connected to a provider or a physician to help get help. These help mothers at night for small children a lot where they're scared, they're concerned, and they want to talk to someone quick. It's been good for that. I think I just have one more slide and then I'll open up for questions and we'll be done, Mayor. Our hospital has received some national recognition as one of the best regional hospitals in the country from US News and World Report. We do hearts and hips and knees really well. These are some other recognitions we've gotten for some of the work we do at our hospital. And next slide is we're just really involved as a not-for-profit serving the community in so many different partnerships. And you can see a lengthy list of things we do and hope to do as we continue in the future. That's all I have to say. Any questions or comments for us at the hospital?
Just glad you're there.
Yeah, we're there 24/7 when you need us for sure.
Hey, Mitch, I just have a quick question.
Yeah.
Are there any plans to have a facility in Washington through Intermountain Healthcare?
We own land there, but there are no current plans.
Okay.
Yeah, we have 5 acres. Yeah, and it's off exit 13.
Okay.
But we are building a clinic in Washington Fields. That was more of a priority than doing something here. So no plans right now for it. It's just land we've been sitting on. You want to buy it, Cress? Do you want to buy it?
No, I was just curious. Thank you.
No existing plans. Yeah. Any other questions?
No, thank you very much, Mitch.
All right.
Thank you
Thank
for
you,
taking the
Kenny.
time. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Good to
Okay.
see you.
See you.
And now we'll talk water. Did you bring me a glass of water, Zach? Got it. No, I missed. Discussion and review water conservation and new development of our landscaping standards. Zach Renstrom.
Who's running it?
Just
Oh, he's virtual. Okay. I really appreciate you having me and let me come and speak to you today. I'm excited about what we have to share. And so, as you know, we live in a desert. We faced a really bad drought this year. It was a really interesting year that we started out as one of the driest seasons ever. The runoff from the Virgin River was one of the lowest ever recorded. And about the end of June, I was starting to get very nervous, and then it just kind of switched. So generally, above Zions National Park, we have a very sophisticated sensor up there. It's called the Snowtail site. At that site, on average, we usually get about 5 inches of rainfall from the monsoons. And this year we've received about 12 to 13 inches. And so it was just so fascinating to see that change almost in a matter of a few weeks. So, but what it has done is it started to drive a lot of conversation about water, what we are going to do with water, also with the rapid growth that's going on. That also kind of added to a lot of it. And so at the district, we're starting to get a lot of comments and questions about it, and talking to a lot of the cities about how are we going to supply it. And one of the key things came up is, okay, we're developing these plans, but we need to start looking at conservation measures, and specifically new conservation measures for new construction. So the district went out and hired a consultant that specializes in this area. And we've also been meeting with the cities, the city staff. We talked to a lot of individual city councils, the mayors. And so we've had a lot of input, and we've got this input about what we're going to recommend now. So the thought is right now I'm just presenting this as just a discussion item to really get your feedback and to hear what you have to say about what you think's good, what we need to work on. We've already met with several cities and got some really good feedback. So it's not saying we want this, it's more of a starting point for a discussion to move forward. So we want to move to the next slide. Is that all I have to say? Or is there some special? All right. So of course, as most people know, we have one limited water supply. Yeah, is that better? Sorry. More is always giving me a hard time, so I have to give him a hard time once in a while. But the Virgin River, we're looking at the end of the water that we have here, and so we need to make sure we're using it appropriately. Let's go to the next slide. Of course, when we look at our history, we've had a lot of growth, and we're going to continue to see this. And so the Kim Senior Gardner Institute is saying that by 2060, we really will be looking at around a population close to 500,000 people. And of course, all those individuals are going to want water also. Next slide. We should celebrate what we have done. Since 2000, we have reduced our water use by 30% per capita. We were the first one to meet the governor's goals for water conservation. We've spent millions and millions of dollars on conservation, and it has paid off. Next slide, please. So these are some of the things that most cities already have, but we just want you to continue to either enforce it or look at it. Of course, the time of day watering, water wasting ordinances, and just when we're going to talk about this for new construction. Next slide. So we've kind of broken this up, and I want to make this very clear. What we're going to be talking about today only applies to new homes. So if you have an existing home and you have lawn there and this has nothing to do with that. It will only be applied for new homes moving forward. And it would also be applied to those that would have secondary irrigation. Next slide. So one of the things that we broke down, and I gotta give a shout out. The home builders have been wonderful. We've been meeting with them quite a bit, and they've provided some really substantial input into this process. It's been very, very helpful. And they've even gone out and done sometimes their own research and brought it back to us. And so we've had a really good discussion with them. So one of the options that we've talked with them and about other things is it would be nice to just have kind of like your traditional conservations, kind of like the default. That's fairly easy to do. But if somebody wanted to come in and spend a little bit of extra time to look at different options, they could go out and hire a professional, like a professional engineer or landscaper, and go through what's called a water sense certification, where they're essentially giving an allocation, and how they want to use that allocation, they can break it up. So we'll kind of dive into that a little bit more. So
Hey, Zach, I just want to
yeah.
make sure I understand. I know you said that this applies to new residential construction, but did I also hear you say, and only those with a secondary water
No.
system?
no, it would also apply to those that have secondary.
Oh, and,
Yeah.
okay,
Thanks.
okay.
Good
thank you.
clarification. Next slide. So we've kind of broken this up, looking at the inside and outside for residential. So if we're inside, we're looking at basically the hot water recirculation pump. And that's basically where you turn on the hot water, and instead of letting that water run for a period of time, you just flip on and there's hot water there instantly. And so it saves quite a bit. And we have a later slide that shows the cost of installing that and the approximate amount of water you'd be able to save on it. Water sense label fixtures. If you go to Home Depot, you'll see both those symbols quite extensively. Pretty much now it's almost hard to find devices that don't have those certifications. And that's one thing that's really nice in meeting with the home builders and also looking at new construction. The vast majority of the things where we're talking here have already been implemented. And so it shouldn't be too hard to say, okay, we're going to require an Energy Star dishwasher, because if you go to Home Depot, 95% of them are already that requirement. It's only the really, really cheapest end models that don't have that. Next slide. So with outdoor, that is where it's about 60% of our water is used. In the indoors, it's tough. People need showers, they need to clean their clothes, they need that stuff. But on the outside, there's a lot more flexibility. So we call this traditional. So this would just be the default. If someone comes in, they don't have to pay a designer, they don't have to do anything, they can just basically handle it straightforward. And so the first step is that we would limit the amount of irrigable landscaping to 2,500 square feet, and specifically the lawn to 750 square feet. Also, that the meters that they install on that landscaping, it has to be one of those smart controllers that connects to your Wi-Fi. And so what happens there is if it rains, it'll essentially either turn itself off, or you can program it to turn itself off during certain times. Avoid lawn that's just on those little narrow strips that people don't usually use, or if it's on a slope greater than 25%. If lawn's over 25% slope, the majority of the water actually just runs off because it's just too steep. Pool covers, that was an interesting debate. Debate is the right word? Discussion. And it was fascinating to talk about. So the majority of pools right now already have covers. There's a huge liability thing there. A lot of times homeowners insurance will require covers. And when I say covers, these are the automatic one where you push a button and it just automatically closes. And there's definitely a cost savings there, but there's also a large cost. And then just the secure city verification. That is once the home is ready for a certificate of occupancy, that your city inspectors actually verify that these things have been done and that they followed the plan. Now, let's say you have a homeowner that comes in and says, hey, I want more lawn than 750 square feet, because that's the default. What they could do is they can go through the other method and go through water sense certification. So if someone came in and goes through the program, and there's a cost to it, it'd be probably about $2,500 to up to $5,000. They could come in and say, well, I'm going to plant Bermuda grass, because Bermuda grass uses about half the amount as a traditional lawn that we have around here. They could, let's say they don't want to do a pool cover, they essentially get that amount of water and then they can do things. So for example, they could go in and install 0.8 flush toilets, and there's a water savings. And they can just start doing things and they'll have a lot more flexibility, but they would be able to keep underneath that bank. So that's what they would have to do, and it would give them more options. The tough thing is then they're going to pay more in design fees for that.
Do you make any distinction in lot sizes? I mean, let's say that, a fifth of an acre lot versus a half acre lot, and
Yeah.
are both limited to the 2,500 square feet of landscaping and 750 square feet of lawn, or has there been much discussion about that?
Yeah. In fact, that's the number one issue that comes up when we've met with other cities. Like Santa Clara City, they said that they have a couple of large lots in the older part of town that are just kind of filler lots, that they were concerned about these restrictions being applied to those old historical lots. And St. George City also kind of talked about these big lots. So we actually went out and looked at some large, like half acre lots that would still qualify for this. And what we've noticed is in the backyard, what they've done is, so they'll have usually zero scape in the front yard. And then the backyard, they'll have a sports court. They'll have like a covered swimming pool. And I have a couple examples coming up here. And then they'll might have a little bit of lawn around it. And so that's usually what happens with those big lots, is they don't just have a lawn now. They install like a sports court or a nice big pool. So next slide.
So I get that. I just, and I'm not even debating the concept, and I appreciate you presenting this. I'm just thinking in terms of a one size fits all approach versus different homes of different sizes and different number of occupants, and maybe have different needs. But
yeah, and those bigger lots will be tough. I mean, if someone has bought an acre lot, and that's kind of where it'll come back is, okay, if somebody has an acre lot, can we give them more flexibility of maybe like purchasing a 1-inch meter and paying much higher impact fees and some different options like that. The tough thing is we only have so many water left. And so either it's kind of how the city councils wants to spend the rest of the water there. And
Sure.
so if we have a big lot that has lots of grass, we'll just have less homes is really what it comes down to. But it's interesting because all the cities that I've gone to said that very thing. What's going to happen to the big lots?
because just for simple math, you have a 1 acre lot, for example, or you have 4 quarter-acre lots, and the 4 quarter-acre lots would have 4 times the use.
Yep.
Than the 1 acre lot. But I know this isn't exact. I really just mostly appreciate your efforts,
Oh
Zach.
no, it's good discussion. That's the tough one, is how we want to use it. Is it okay for somebody to come in and essentially pay for a larger meter, or somehow figure out so they can get more water, and how to compensate right now?
But on the flip side to that, we have some large lots in Washington where they've just grassed a huge area and they just water it like crazy. And so anyway, I don't have the solution.
Zach,
it's tough.
if they had an area that they just absolutely had to have the look of grass, artificial turf would meet your qualifications.
Oh,
correct?
absolutely. Yeah.
And then if they needed an area where they actually wanted to play on it, then that could actually be natural glass. So they could do a blend of that and have fit most of those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, I like, if they wanted a swing set, they could go and put that ground up bark. There's also materials called VitroTurf. It's kind of like a rubberized mat that's really spongy. And so in areas that have implemented these really strict conservation measures, usually that's what happens, is they'll start looking at different technologies rather than just putting standard grass in. So this is the cost. And now some of them was zero because pretty much the home builders are already doing it. Some of them is a little bit more. And of course, the pool covers is the most expensive item, but it will save a lot of water. So just kind of put in perspective, if you have a pool, imagine so if it's not covered and you just leave it out, you'd have almost 6 feet of water evaporate out of that pool every year without a cover. And with the cover, it cuts the cost, well, the amount of water evaporating in sometimes as high as 70%.
Hey, Zach, can I ask you a question? I'm sorry.
Sure.
I didn't mean to
No,
cut you
please.
off right there in mid-sentence.
This
but
is great.
I had a pool years ago and we had a pool cover
Uh-huh.
and we bought it for a lot of reasons. The number one being safety. In a lot of cases, when it's 105 and 10 degrees outside, if you leave a cover on, your water temperature could be close to that as well.
Yeah.
So any consideration about how that
They
would
make
render
covers
the,
that are designed to reflect the sun back off that actually keep it cooler. They're
okay, I
designed to
didn't know
actually keep
that.
it cooler that we don't, a lot of it's made for the northern climates. So they're actually designed to heat your pool up, but they do make pool covers that are.
But most of the pool covers around here don't do that.
Yeah, mine was
Most
a cheap
people I
one.
know just leave it open because it's too hot.
Yeah.
So that's the problem is the evaporations happen in the summer. And that's when they're leaving it open because it's too hot.
Because they can't use their pool and that's the reason they have.
So
it.
even with, so they went through and they said, okay, we know people are leaving it up. And they've done some studies, and even having the cover, they still cover it during the winter time a lot and during the times they're not home. And so there's still quite a bit there. And down in other areas where this is like in Phoenix, where it's actually hotter, they actually now have chillers that they put in with their pools to keep the water cool. So there's some things there too. Let's go to the next slide. So we went out and the district actually has a landscape architect on staff, and I asked him to lay out what a large lot, a 12,000 square foot lot would look like. And so this would be kind of a typical thing where you start looking at more courtyards. A lot of key with this too is we do not want just gravel. Those communities that have put gravel down, they've actually found out that was a problem. And so I'll use the city of Tucson. They've had some problems, and now they have a goal of actually going back and planting 200,000 trees because they ripped out all their lawn. They simply just left gravel, and the heat index went high. And so a key to this is what we're saying is don't plant the grass, but let's make sure that there's still a lot of trees and shrubs to keep that cooling effect.
Did they see a spike in their power rates as a result of that?
So the study I saw, they didn't look at the power, but what they did is they took an image and basically looked at the infrared coming off the city, and it had increased.
So you could infer that.
You can infer it, yeah. And then you say, well, of course they'd have to turn up the air conditioning.
So you're dealing with a few different natural resources. So you're saying there's a good balance to find. And if you're going to do rock, do trees.
Yeah, and you can come up to the desert garden up on the hill. And actually the city installed that beautiful park that has great desert landscaping that has a lot of cooling effect. You still can have your lawn. You can have a fire pit and the playground and just do some unique things to it to still have a very nice yard. So next slide. So these are these are brand new construction. So the landscape hasn't had a chance to mature very much. But these are examples that are current homes that are being built that would easily comply. So they have a little bit of lawn. They planted some landscaping that'll start to mature, and these would easily comply with the new standard. Next slide. So these are actually some quite a bit larger lots. Now, two things are happening. The one on the left, I think that's the one on your left, you can see they have a massive swimming pool right there. But since it's covered, it would easily comply. They have some desert landscaping around. And so with the home on the left, even though it's a very large lot, they could still easily plant some additional grass if they wanted that. But you can see the pool with what looks like a fire pit and some other vegetation around there. The one on the right, that was a big lot, but they kept a lot of the lot that just wouldn't be used as undisturbed. And so they have a little bit of grass, they have some nice areas, and then it's a hillside behind them. And so that would be another thing that for these bigger lots is just look at not disturbing all the footprint of it, because then it wouldn't count against you. Next slide. And of course, for the certification, if they don't like these defaults, they can go in and hire somebody, a designer, and start looking at that. And so they do for home builders, they do a fair insulation. And so when you have a home built, you basically pay for a study and it says, okay, if I'm going to use this type of window, I might have to add more insulation in the attic. And so that, or a more efficient heating and air conditioning unit. And so that's how this water certification would also work. Next slide. So if you have a really big yard, almost a quarter of an acre, it would be this thing where you start installing sport courts in the back. So you still have your lawn. And like I said, if you want to double the amount of lawn, just go to a Bermuda type grass, or there's some other warm season grass. Bermuda used to kind of be a swear word around here, but there's a new hybrids that don't have the same problems as that old Bermuda grass has. The school district has really adopted the Bermuda grass very aggressively. They're applying it to a lot of their fields. And so before it was almost impossible to get Bermuda grass, but now since the school district is incorporating in a lot of theirs, that you can actually now purchase it around here. And you can also just, buy it and plant the seeds. Next slide. So these lots, they have a little bit more grass than would be expected. And so they'd be outside of that, but with their certifications and do a few things, they would probably easily comply. So the one on the left, if that was all Bermuda grass, they would easily comply, even though they have more grass than the 750. But if they just came in and says, we agree to plant Bermuda, we're going to limit the landscaping on the size of the house, they'd still be able to have it. Next slide. So commercial, that's a little bit different of a beast. And so we kind of broke that out too. The indoor requirements is similar to the homes. With commercial, they're already kind of doing a lot of this stuff already. We actually challenged them to go out and find a commercial dishwasher that's not Energy Star compliant, and they were unable to find one. And so, and that makes sense. And so with commercial, the only thing that we'd still want the hot water recirculation pump. Now, I will say with these is some of these are not black and white rules. So with the hot water recirculation pump, that would not make sense in a small townhome, because the hot water heater is so close to the sinks that you turn on the water and it's hot water within a few seconds anyways. And so some of these will have to put some caveats in there. So also, like with commercial, a lot of times they just have the instant hot water tanks right next to a sink. And so, of course, you wouldn't have a recirculation pump on that. And so some things would fall into that. And one that came up a lot actually was recycled pumps at car washes. St. George City started requiring that. And we actually took a trip down to Las Vegas where it is required. They're very functioning, but there is additional cost. And I like bringing up car washes as an example, because one of the things that we've noticed in going around and meeting with the cities and talking to the individuals in the cities, it was pretty much uniform that everybody wants to do something. They agree that we need to do something and they want to do something, but they don't want to be the entity that takes it all on. They're saying, listen, we agree that we want to work together. And that's one of the reasons why we're reaching out. And car washes are a perfect example where there was a municipality that implemented, hey, you have to have recycling on your car washes. Well, what happened is right on the border, there was a bunch of car washes. And what it was is there's a cost saving there. And so the city right next to it that didn't require the recirculation pump, that's where the car wash was built. And so if Washington all of a sudden came in and says, well, we're going to require car washes to have this, and St. George doesn't, I can tell you what's going to happen is right on that border, you're going to have a bunch of car washes. And we kind of see that going through a lot of these things. The other thing is in meeting with people is, and the home builders, and a few other, the landscapers, they also like the uniform policy, because they don't want to have to think about, okay, this is homes in St. George, so it's this. It's easier for them to do multiple bids if it's uniform across all the areas. Next slide.
Zach, are you going to come back to residential at all?
Yeah, but what's your question?
So I'm just thinking this through with, are you going to talk about the inspection at the end before the CO? Or are you going to, was that in a different slide I can hold?
No, it's not. So let's, yeah.
So my question is, so we're talking about new residential construction, and the two houses that we built, we actually finished our front yard, but did not initially complete our backyard.
Right.
So how would you envision that playing out? Are you saying that backyards would need to be completed at time of construction, and then at the final inspection that the city would have to sign off that these standards are being met?
So with the certification, so if they wanted to go the special route, they wouldn't need to put that in, because there's very strict rules about how much grass is allowed. Most of the municipalities are the same way. The front yard has to be in, but you'd still have a city ordinance. So, and this is one of those areas we have to discuss, because what's the best way to enforce what a homeowner does in the back? Now, there will be a city ordinance that says you can only have this much grass. So let's say somebody goes and plants the full thing in the backyard. They'd be violating city ordinances. And so hopefully they wouldn't do that.
So the purpose of this meeting, though, you're collaborating to kind of say, here are the guidelines that we recommend, that is an ordinance kind of county-wide.
Yes.
But you would basically expect the city then to enforce, to implement and basically enforce the ordinance. Is that?
Yeah, and that's the key thing is as a water district, and this is a good thing in my opinion, we have no abilities to enforce, to mandate. There's nothing that all this comes back to cities councils because you are the elected individuals to make these rules. And like I said, I agree with that concept. Well, it's not a concept, it's the law. And it's a good thing. And so, yeah, so the city would have to take on the responsibility of making sure certain things happen. That's what we'd have to do.
Well, and there's no doubt that we need to do what we can to conserve water. But I'm kind of thinking through, in some cases, their homes and building costs are increasing. And in some cases you may have, owners or builders who have incurred extra expense here. And now if they're expected to finish the backyard, that makes it a little tougher to, but I guess that's just the reality of the environment I'm saying meaning if this ordinance is passed.
Yeah.
But
and
you're
like-
not actually saying that the backyard has to be done at the time of, or are you?
No. Well, if they do the water sense certification, yes. And that's kind of a different beast because they're going to spend more money and do all this other stuff. But for your standard home, which would probably be about 85% of the homes, the backyard at this time would not need to be done. But when it is done, they would still need to follow the rules of the city. I know the
I'm just
question
thinking,
is,
how do we monitor that? And how do the homeowners remember that I'm allowed, X amount of total square footage and X amount of grass and or pool? I'm just thinking through
yeah. So with
the implementation.
pool's a little different because they have to come and get a permit, even if, So in the backyard, then these are just ideas that have been thrown out. So this is not my idea that some city council individuals said, well, what we could do is have them have like a $500 bond that basically says, okay, you get your CO, your certificate of occupancy. And once the yard's done within a 2-year period or whatever, the city will come out and look at it. And if it's good, they get the $500 back. Or, there's been discussion about saying, no, if you're going to go and do your backyard, you just have to go get a building permit and make it very easy for someone to come in and say, here's the plan, or take the plan that they submitted during building construction and say, we're going to comply with it. And so the city would go out and look at it and say, yeah, this is good.
See, and those are good ideas, but I just think it's going down a path I don't want to go down. I mean, me personally, I took 3 years to do my backyard. I
Yeah.
pecked away at it for 3 years. I don't think it's right that we should be able to dictate what people can do on their backyard. Now, I think we have the rules that I'm not against the rules because we need to conserve water, but I don't think we need to be enforcing more permits and more things for someone to do what they want on their property.
Yeah.
So that's my concern with that. I mean, that's just more regulation on our personal property at that
Yeah,
point.
but this is the problem that governments get into all the time, which is we see something that is difficult and then we make it easy for ourselves. So we need to kind of take a look at this. I'd really love to have the city staff put in how they would like to
Yeah.
see it. They're going to be on the tip of the spear of that, make a recommendation to us. But I think we've got a workable target there.
But I do like the fact of having the front yard. Everyone wants their front yard done.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a rule that's been implemented already, that so the streets look nice and everyone's house is finished, so the front yards are done, and get those done and limit those and have those square footages based on the front yard of an average lot. I mean, I like that process, but I don't think we need to, me personally don't want to dip into the backyards.
And that's the tough thing because I think for the most part, people are doing a really good job. It's those people that, let's say they have, let's say a 13,000 square foot lot and they go and they plant like a half acre, well, not a half acre, but a lot of grass in their backyard. That's the tough thing, but that's the discussion we have. I'm glad we're having actually, because that's what we need to talk about right now. I know I just built a house and I can't get a landscaper to do my backyard. Like if the city had a requirement that says finish your backyard, it would be me and my wife out there with digging trenches. And that adds to it also. But any ideas you have on the backyards, because it's been brought up a couple of times, I'd appreciate the feedback.
Zach, I don't have an idea about the backyard yet, but we had a great conversation about 2 months ago. We talked about a lot of things and we kind of even looked at the bigger picture of water. We talked about, some drilling, some agricultural water, septic tanks, and a few things that was really valuable to me as I've gone forward. The one thing that I've that I've noticed more recently is that, during, was it 2000? Oh gosh, I think it was 10 to 15, growth of the county was 13%, or anyway, we used less water during that time. And just Mike, probably the point that I want to make right now with not only you, but with our city staff and the other council is that whenever I hear the word mandates or requirements, man, I'll tell you that sends a shiver through me, because what I see a lot of times is with those well-meaning requirements, they end up costing the homeowner more.
Mhm.
And because of some of the situations we've talked with tonight, it's somewhat concerning. But I do think that people have responded very well. You can think of the pandemic. You can think about, I ride my bike a lot around Enterprise, and I see the campfires, that because there's a campfire restriction. My point is that people, if they're educated and they're taught well, I think that most people, especially our very responsible contractors, builders, and homeowners, I think they would do well if we could provide information. So as this conversation develops, I would appreciate if we, and this is just my perspective, I'm not speaking for the other council members, but if we can have the discussion that's more inclined to look at it from a responsible citizen or developer point of view rather than mandates, that's something I would look at first. And my educational background.
Oh,
I
yes.
understand water and work and all that stuff. And I appreciate the fact that there isn't an endless supply. We're in the Navajo Aquifer, and that's what we have to deal with. And I appreciate that. But I just really think going forward, unless we have some really constructive conversations, I don't want to impose any restrictions on my residents other than ones that I know will meet the end goal that we're after. I hope you kind of understand where I'm coming from on that.
Yeah, and yeah, and that's why we're having this discussion, because there is a discussion of maybe not doing anything, honestly, of just saying, let's not do this. And then I'll be back here and I'll say, okay, this is what it's really going to be is, do you want to build this many homes or this many homes? And maybe that's where it comes back. We'll just build less homes.
So I've heard you say that over
Yeah.
the years, Zach.
Yeah.
But I've never heard anyone else say that. Everyone else, I think, like you mentioned, everyone understands there's a water shortage.
Right.
You talk to builders, you talk to everyone that cares about the community knows, hey, we have a water shortage.
Right.
And so I think we're all in focus of making a plan, but maybe we make a plan, but we're not jumping in a full 100%. Let's baby steps into this and maybe make some landscape restrictions, but not get so far that, hey, you got to do this or you can't even build a home in Washington City. I'm going to be like, let's back it
Yeah.
off a little and work on it. But I know we're in a pretty major drought, 20-year drought. So I understand that we got to make some decisions and move forward. But I'm with Councilman Ivy. I don't want to go, too far down the path and just don't want to end up like Tucson. And
Yeah.
so finding that happy medium for the quality of life that we all enjoy as well.
So this is perfect. This is exactly what I was hoping for tonight. Like, what are the things that you'd be more comfortable looking at?
So I think I think education's huge.
Right.
Because I have neighbors that I'm like, hey, your water's running down the gutter. Apparently you're not doing it right. And
Right.
your grass is dying still. So it's just going out and informing them. So I think we can do a better job of education. We can do a better job of the type of plants that are grown in this area. And you guys do a very good job on your plant, in your garden up there. And so those are the things I think are important. And then I'm about limiting grass, but not getting crazy, because if we limit all our grass, where are our kids going to play at our house? Then they have to go to our schools and our parks, which are overrun, and they're full of grass so that we can do those things. But I think I like the different types of grass to help the water saving grass. That's how I'd like to see is the water saving plants and not be restricted on the quantity. Now I get if you have a half acre, let's not put in a half acre of grass. It makes sense not to do those. But and I'd like to see a ratio on lot size. But maybe if you get over a certain amount, you already have it. When I built my house, can't remember what it was, but if you went over so many square feet of grass, it's an extra $2,000 or $3,000.
Yeah.
So I get those costs, but the people that can afford those larger lots, most of them aren't going to care. And they just, all right, pay the check.
Yeah.
And that's not helping save the water. It's just getting more money, which we need the money to build the infrastructure too. So it's a catch-22, but that's where I'm at. is I think it's more education and knowledge and get people on track to do more water conserving on their own property and let them make that choice.
Councilman, don't you think though that we need to get to a place where people are really thinking very hard about this and being creative?
Yes.
And
And
I even look at my own yard and I've got a trampoline in my backyard on top of the grass, which forces me to move the dang trampoline every time I mow. But I mean, I
you
could
just dig a
easily,
hole.
I
That's
could
what did.
easily have set that up in a different way where, where it wasn't, where it was sitting in a
Yeah.
place that didn't need to be watered. I think however we come to this, we really, I mean, we're just taking it for granted at this point is
Mhm.
the biggest problem. We're not really actually thinking into it. So however we design this, we need to come up with something that actually, I mean, I trust the people, I trust our landscape designers. They're going to come up with some unique. I just want to make sure that the government doesn't put so many regulations in there that we can't come up with unique solutions to have a beautiful city.
Mhm.
You know,
I agree.
so
But-
we
but-
kind of put the regulations out there, put the goal out there to make sure we're there. And I think I think they're going to solve it on their own, and they're going to come back with some really impressive things that we haven't even thought of.
Well, and the other thing that I know we're all working on is secondary irrigation. If we get secondary irrigation, it just makes more, it's using the water that we can't put in our homes and spreads it out, which if we can get everybody on secondary irrigation, I mean, we've just doubled our capacity. Now, where that water comes from is still, you got to find that source too, even if it's wastewater or whatever.
We're working on it.
So, but
I
those
mean,
are,
sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you,
I'm done.
but the other model to go with this has been proposed by some of our city staff to say, you know, as we were initially talking about this, is just to set a baseline for this is how much water you get. Everything above that is actually goes up at a tier level to say, now, if you want this much grass, you're going to pay for that. That might be a trip to Europe, you know, but if you're willing to give up your trip to Europe, put in that much grass, you know, that might be a thing that you do. I don't know. I'm somewhere there's a solution in there where we can get, like I said, our landscape designers and these people to really get creative about making a beautiful city in spite of the fact that we're in a desert.
This is great.
So Zach,
Yeah.
just a question. Let me give you a football analogy.
Okay.
Okay, you have a playbook. All right. So here's the offense, defense. What if we had that? We may have it. I'm not so sure that Carrie doesn't have something like that in her little file. That, okay, for a 2,000 square foot home, your backyard could look like this. We could have that of it. You could have this, this, and this. For a 15,000 square foot place, you could have this. Here's your playbook. These are some of the things that could work and could keep you conserving water. Do we have something?
Yeah, so we actually teach classes where we invite people to come up, and a lot of times they'll come up with house plans and say, well, this is what I'm thinking. And then we'll have our landscape architect sit down and say, well, have you thought of this? Like, okay, you don't have to necessarily have grass underneath the swing set. Let's put sand, just, you know, or maybe bark underneath there, or the vitroturf that's that rubberized. And so they'll start working with them and move it around and say, well, let's put a sports court here and break that up with some trees, and then put your pool here and break it up and put the fire pit. And so they start doing much more unique designs.
And you could do that with, okay, your budget's $50. What do you do for $50? And you got $100 budget, and then you got a $400 budget. I mean, that's what I'm looking at is that type of, and if that class is available, are we advertising that?
Yeah.
I think a lot of it's communication, like everything else.
So-
If these folks out here and myself could know that, hey, I can go to a class
Yeah.
and these are available, and you give us a tour of the garden, and this could work here and this could, because we did that.
Yeah.
And some of our plants have died because of the heat, but obviously I don't have a green thumb. And we've done the drip system and all that, and it has worked. And I have noticed that we have saved water. And
Yeah,
so-
people come up to our garden and take pictures of stuff, and it's been very good. Sorry, you were.
Yeah, question for you. So I know we've talked to Home Builders Association. Are you getting input from yard care, yard maintenance groups and landscaping designers? What are they saying about your proposal?
Yes. And if we had 100 landscapers in here, we'd have 100 different opinions. So half of them,
So they're like farmers then.
yeah. And it's very interesting in talking to them. And it's just kind of over the gamut. Some think that we should really move this way. They are concerned about, we live in a desert, we should do it. And other ones are like, no, people want green grass. They want the green, and I'm going to keep putting enough water on that grass until They would not. And we, even with this drought that came through, it was, well, I'll pick on the LDS church. It was very, most of the LDS churches, they have contractors with private landscapers. And so they want to keep that grass nice and green because that's their client. And so it was very difficult to get the LDS church to turn back those clocks. They did, and I appreciated that, but it wasn't, I understand what the landscaper's thinking. He wants, he just wants to make his client happy.
So I guess my number one concern is, are we hearing from some of these folks like that's going to put me out of business? That's going to just wreck what I currently do in the area, or was it mostly trying to, I'm guessing that most of the yard care is going to shift from grass to shrubs and plants, and that there's still going to be that business in the area, and that's going to be okay. But it's not an area where I have any expertise, but I city, when we make laws, sometimes they have unintended consequences.
Yeah.
I'd like to explore those as much as possible.
I think when talking, and I don't want to speak, but I know with the home builders, one of their concerns was affordability. And so trying to keep those things in check as much as possible. And then the bigger lots are like, okay, I have a 2-acre lot or maybe an acre lot. What do I do with that? What happens to that? And those were the two areas that I think they're concerned about that. Not just the home builders, but people I talked to. But the landscapers, they said grass is easy and cheap to put down. But now that we're getting our nurseries better with the plants and stuff like that, they said it wasn't that big a deal.
Okay.
Because they're doing a lot of it already.
Okay.
So.
And I know we've pulled you off of this here.
Oh,
but
no,
at
this
some
is
point-
this is
at
this is
some
a
point
wonderful
in
discussion.
your presentation, both Councilman Staley and myself noticed that about the secondary water. I want you just to define what would qualify as secondary water and how that would affect us in the future if we bring secondary water into the city.
So the thing with secondary water, and it's, I mean, I could come and give a whole other presentation on that about where that water is coming from. And essentially in how I look at it is secondary water is just going to displace the culinary water that's currently being used. So right now, all the cities are using a lot of culinary water outside. And I want to take this water over here that's tougher to treat or very expensive to treat to drinking water standards and put that on the landscaping. So to me, a drop of water is a drop of water. And so if we're going to, the reason why the district is looking so strongly at the secondary watering system and the large expenses is because it's just going to free up a lot of culinary water.
And with the mixing of the untreated water with the culinary water, the challenge is going to be to get that mix to the right level that it's adequate for yards.
Yes.
Right. We don't want, because of the soluble content of the water to kill our plants and grass that we do have. So that's going to be the challenge, but there's no doubt about it that if we can extend the drinking water for drinking and use untreated water or what we would call untreated water, mixed water, essentially, secondary water for our landscapes, that's something I think that's part of the solution, as are a lot of these measures. And I hope you don't feel beat up at all.
Oh, no.
Because we actually really appreciate our partnership with the district and all the work you do. And I understand that we understand that these are recommendations that you're trying to be part of the solution.
So
Well,
Zach,
and-
as we go through this, as we have secondary water, is there any fear on the district's part to say that we're kind of penalizing those that are going for secondary water? They're being creative about how they're using other water sources. They're doing what they need to do to maximize whatever water sources they have, but then we're kind of penalizing those same users by requiring them to move into these standards. Am I wrong in my assumption, or am I?
It's very hard because I think from a water standpoint, like I kind of say, is a drop of water is a drop of water to me. And so it's going to come down to a cost and how we deal with all that and just making the water available. And so ideally you would have a home, and we kind of talk about this. Let's say you have a 10,000 square foot lot, you'd have a culinary meter and a secondary meter in front of your house. And the cost, well, and it's still water, but the cost to treat and develop that secondary water would be cheaper. And so they would probably have a little bit of a cheaper water rate for that secondary rather than the culinary rate. And the secondary water, like I said, you'd have to send it through reverse osmosis and a few other things to make it potable. So it would be very, very expensive to get it to that point.
I just don't want to de-incentivize anybody to do that, because that when we start getting creative about how we're doing that, That's what's going to solve our problem here.
Yeah.
So,
And it's tough because when we look at the secondary, even if we take treated sewer water, which is actually pretty high standard, and you apply it to certain plants, it would kill those plants because there are some very, very sensitive plants. But if you take that reuse water and apply it to 90% of vegetation that we currently have, you would see no effect.
Right.
And so,
So it feels like the challenge here then, if I'm listening to everybody correctly, is to find the solution that saves the most water, but is the least heavy handed,
yeah,
and kind of implement those first, and then let's see where we get to. Because I think there is that discussion of, what do we want to look like? Do we want to, jam as many homes in as we can possibly put in, at the expense of making it look
Right.
nice? So I think that's the challenge for the district and the staff that are working with you. Let's try to find the solution that saves the most water and is the least heavy handed.
right.
Heavy handed also means extra cost to the city and the residents in enforcement and in design review and things like that. So
No, and this is a very robust discussion we're having as a community, because my hope is I'm going to get this feedback and get feedback from all the cities and then bring it back to you and say, hey, after I've heard this and this, and we made modifications to these things. And so I think it's great that staff can hear these same discussions too.
So Zach, maybe two other points that you could speak to. The first is mostly a query. It seems like there was a lot of interest in gray water systems a while back. Is that still something that is possible, or is that off the list for a reason?
So usually I want to make sure we're defining gray water. So that's usually what happens is you have a house and you take water and you don't treat it or send it through the sewer. You just immediately use it on site.
Yeah.
So generally why we don't like those systems is because the only gray water that's really safe to use is water generally from like a dishwasher or washing machine. Because even let's say a shower, people do things like, people pee in the shower, they wash off germs and bacteria. Even let's say a sink, people sometimes I don't know, they throw up in the sink, or they'll wash off let's say they cut their finger and they go wash it. And so there's pathogens in that treated water or that gray water. And so there's a lot of health concerns there.
So using that on a yard has health concerns?
Well, it's one of those things that it could. Now, if you do sub irrigation systems and stuff like that, it helps so people don't get involved in that. But what the goal is basically is take that water, send it to a water treatment plant where it can be treated safely, make sure that all those pathogens are killed, and then take that reuse water and pump it back into the system. And that's kind of the goal. Some communities have adopted gray use systems that have allowed it, but the vast majority of municipalities haven't gone there because of the health concerns there.
That's interesting, because the same guy that's peeing in his shower also pees in his yard, right? I mean,
Well-
the same things that happen inside the house happen in
Yes.
the yard frequently.
Yeah.
But I just, for a while, it was kind of a hot topic and I haven't heard it lately. So it sounds like it's
I
the
thought-
public safety
I
concern.
didn't think of it that way, but I did think when I cut my finger off with the lawnmower and bleed all over my lawn, I don't really have that treated either. So, but
Well,
Yeah,
I mean, your
it's-
yards have human impact on them, right?
Yeah.
The second question, and this one's fairly relevant to Washington City because we have some older neighborhoods. Have we talked about how those, when they get renovated and redeveloped, how they might fit into a conservation mindset as well?
And that's actually with Santa Clara's issue. That was probably their biggest issue in talking to their city council, because they're like, we have this historical aspect. And so right now, this would only apply to new construction. And so if you had a home and you're remodeling it, they'd be able to remodel it, but it wouldn't affect any of the landscaping or anything like that around it.
So they would kind of be grandfathered in
They would
as
be
to how big
grandfathered
their
in.
lawn is. Could we
they're-
incentivize redevelopment projects somehow?
Yes. Yeah. And that's part of the whole discussion of doing that. Or they were a little bit more concerned if you have a lot in a historical neighborhood and you have these two historical homes, and then you stick one home right in the middle of it that has this like more zero scape, they were concerned about that. And so those lots may have to be grandfathered into.
So, but is there currently anything in the ordinance that suggests to existing homes to say, yes, there's a financial benefit if you do a couple of things to make your yard?
So
use less
right,
water?
right now, the district has certain incentive programs that, let's say you want to do toilets or smart meters and stuff like that. The state of Utah has just recently started to develop a grass rebate program where they're going to start paying people to tear out their grass. Right now, that has been focused along the Wasatch Front a little bit more. But part of it is because they're kind of wanting us to have, and I've told them that we're having these discussions. They want to see how those discussions go. But that is it's just a matter of time whether either we do it here locally or the state comes and does it.
So that would be a state funded program, or is it?
I think it would be a combination of state, probably federal, and probably district funds that would go to some type of system like that.
Is that how it's currently funded up north with the grass rebate program?
Right now, the state is just paying for it, and then the water districts will come and subsidize it by helping running the system. Because to do those grass rebate programs requires a lot of staff time, because you go out and you measure all the grass, then you allow them to, then you go back out and you look at it again, and there's some stuff like that. But we'll most likely have to get there at this point.
Zach.
Yeah.
If I may interrupt. I think we've got the message.
Well,
And
let
do
me
you
do
have-
one more slide.
Okay.
Is
So
that
we
okay?
do have another item
Okay.
that we need to get rolling
Oh.
on. So
Yes, right here for the Commercial Institute. So this is another one is on for commercial, industrial, or retail. Basically, there's a prohibition on lawn. Basically, you come out and you say there's no lawn allowed. But if they can come in and show that there's a purpose for that lawn, then you allow it. So let's say a sandwich place comes in and they says, listen, we want to build a sandwich shop and we want a square piece of grass over here because this is where we want people to go and sit down and eat their sandwich. Then you say, yeah, that has a purpose. Or if someone, let's say a homeowner association comes in and says, listen, we're going to have this grass and it's going to be designed such that this is where kids will play on it. They'd be allowed. But the default would be no grass. And then they would come back and they just say, hey, this is our plan. And they kind of explain why it's a functioning purpose, not just a decorative purpose. And then of course we just have them require them to install trees and shrubs, drip systems, and also those smart meters too. So if any of you want to call me up and talk to me, if you have ideas, I like, this has been a really good discussion going around to the cities and having this discussion. And so it's been good. Thank you.
thank you,
Thank you,
Zach,
Zach.
very much.
How many
Appreciate it.
slides did we miss?
Not that you missed like one or two. It's not that big a deal.
But you had that. You could send it to us in a link if you want.
Yeah, I can send
Okay.
you a PDF of it and then you can email it out.
All
But
right.
please, seriously, give me a call. Some of the cities I've already gone to, I've had some city council individuals call me with some really good feedback. And so, yeah, we'll continue to talk.
Are we still on for tomorrow?
It's tomorrow. Yes. Yes.
Thank you, Zach.
All right. Thanks.
Appreciate it. Discussion review of a traffic light on the corner of Washington Fields and 3090 South Majestic Drive. Michael Shaw, I'm sure.
Thank you, Mayor. Hope this got sent out to you. So we actually requested a warrant study. We've done many warrant studies on this intersection. With the increased growth, we knew that we were going to need a signal at either this location or 3650 or 3650 in the Fields Road, or both out of them here relatively soon. So we actually had them, the engineers, go out and do actually traffic warrant study on it. And this time it actually met the warrants. So what we tried to do is there's 9 warrants and we tried to meet 3 of those warrants. And we actually did meet those 3 warrants and actually right on the verge of that 4th warrant. So it actually warrants it. We've actually went ahead and ordered the design of the signal. We're probably about a month out on design. And then we're going to be probably 6 months on equipment. Once we get the design, we can order equipment. We can go ahead and get it bid out and moving ahead, but probably within about 6 months, we can have that signal installed at that intersection. I think a while back, we sent out a letter to the council that actually tells you what the warrants are. I don't know if council remembers that or if you
I don't
actually
think we ever got that, Mike.
I remember Andy going through that at the Active Transportation Committee, but I'm curious as to what 3, almost 4 warrants were met at Washington Fields and 3090 South.
So we met the warrants. And I printed this out and it didn't print out right, so I'm kind of. Yeah, I don't have my warrants here, so I can't. Didn't print one of the pages for me.
I'm guessing one of them is proximity to a school.
That was one of them. So there,
So
did you
warrant-
find them?
Well, part of
I've
it.
got them here if you don't have them.
Yeah, so it met the warrant one, and warrant one is
Warrant one is the 8-hour vehicular volume.
right. It's really hard to read these pages the way it read out. So yeah, the 8-hour vehicle volume, it met warrant one. Warrant two was met, and it's a 4-hour vehicle volume. Warrant three it met, and that's the peak hour volume. And I believe it was warrant five. And warrant five, school crossing. And that was the one that was just right on the verge of meeting warrant five, but close enough that it counts. So. But like I say, there's the 9 warrants. I do have that page that's actually, we actually developed that for the council. So when people called the council, they actually had this that they could go off of that. This is what meets warrants. This is why we do the warrant studies for a signalized intersection. We also have one for stop signs and one for speed limits, that the warrants, what we have to meet on those as well.
So 3090s meeting warrants, any update on 3650 or Merrill or any other?
Oh, we haven't done a warrant on those. I mean, each time I do a warrant study, it's about.
Not asking for,
$8,000.
just curious as to what you see on those, or if there's any other
So,
thoughts
you
on
know,
those.
we will look at those right now. I mean, 3650 is going to be really close, especially if anything develops right at the intersection. If we get the tie into the Southern Parkway, it will definitely meet those warrants. We do want to try to get signals in before we have issues. A good example was Telegraph and Washington Parkway, knowing that those apartments were going to get built, knowing that the day they opened apartments, it would meet warrants. So we went ahead and got the design done, ordered the equipment, then our equipment got back ordered. And actually the apartments did open before we had the signal up, but not because we didn't try.
So Mike, it looks like it'll be 6-8 months if we're ready to move forward on it
Right. So
with getting materials.
yeah, we're going to be 7 to 8 months.
7 to 8 months. And we had one light scheduled in our budget or planned in our budget this year for either 3650 or 3090. So we have it in our budget to do those lights.
And that's what I've been doing for the previous years, is just making sure we have money budgeted in case something comes up, a warrant that meets warrants, we have the funds to build.
Mike, do you ever try to just keep one in stock, or is that financially unfeasible?
Yeah, they're all different. You know, because you got to get your mast arms for the size of the road, the placement of the poles. So everything's different. The only thing we could keep in stock is the signal cabinets, and those aren't actually that tough to get.
And Mike, seeing that you're kind of the resident expert here with safety and roads and all that, seeing that it's going to take a while to get that installed, is there any suggestions that you'd make to the city council or to the residents in the meanwhile to keep those students safe crossing there? And
Really, when you're driving there, just, you know, keep your eyes open, drive safely, teach your children how to cross intersections.
Okay.
Use the crosswalks, look both ways.
you know, I see a couple of crossing guards that are here tonight and a school principal, and you know, we appreciate their partnership in this and in keeping those kids safe. Appreciate your diligence, Mike, in getting that done in a timely manner also.
Right. And one thing I did want to bring up, so crosswalks, we get a lot of requests for crosswalks, and crosswalks really actually create a problem because it gives people the false sense of security, because the crosswalks, a pedestrian has the right of way no matter where they are, but they'll come to a crosswalk and just go to cross the road without looking. And yeah, they have the right of way, but there's cars coming. When you don't have a crosswalk, they will stop. They tend to look both ways. So we really try not to put crosswalks in You know, we put them in school areas on their walking paths. But that's where we try to limit them to, is those walking paths to school.
I appreciate that. And City Manager Red, I just want you to know that our police department has done a terrific job. You know, they've been there, they've been proactive in getting out and engaging, knowing that that is a concern, and would hope that we could continue with them being there on those mornings and afternoons. I think that'd be a great thing to keep up with. So appreciate them and their efforts.
Yeah, we actually looked at this intersection last year, didn't do the actual warrant, but we looked at it. And once we opened Merrill Road, we actually seen a decrease in the traffic at that intersection. So, but this year with the additional growth, and it did meet warrants.
Good.
Right. Any additional questions for Mike? Thank you very much, Mike. Glad to have that coming. Okay, I'll adjourn this meeting and we'll come back at 6.
I'll motion that we adjourn.
Thank you.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Mayor and I just do it.
Welcome to our meeting. I've asked Councilman Ivy if he will offer our invocation, and I've asked Cade from the North Stake, what ward was it? 19th Ward, if he will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
You're good. You're good. Our Father in heaven, we're thankful for the circumstances that brings us together this evening to represent this wonderful city of Washington. Father, we're thankful for thy blessings that you bestow upon us individually in our city every day. We're thankful for where we live. We pray for their guidance as we serve this city and as the citizens reach out, that we might listen and make choices that are best for us all. Father, at this time, we also pray for Maureen Taylor Hoover, who passed away in Afghanistan, a Utah native. We ask thy blessings to be with his family and with his friends, to ease his passing and to let them know how much we appreciate his service in our behalf. Father, we love you very much. We ask thee to be with us this night. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
Man, thank you.
Please follow me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Councilman Ivy, and thank you, Kate, for doing that. We appreciate it. Okay, I'd like to, before we approve the agenda, I'd like to flip-flop 4 and 5, if I may. I have another commitment for a little bit with Pineview High School. So to approve the agenda, I'll entertain a motion.
Mayor,
Oh,
I'll-
no.
Go ahead.
Mayor, I will approve the agenda for our city council regular meeting, September 8th, 2021.
Staley, second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Announcements. I do have one announcement. On September 17th at 1:30 PM at the Veterans Park, we will be having a constitutional support, a little get together. We invite you to come. We're going to talk about the Constitution and the importance that it is in our lives, and celebrate that part of what keeps us free. So next Friday, the 17th at 1:30 at Veterans Park. Any other announcements?
Mayor, maybe just a reminder that September 11th, National Day of Service, it's coming up this Saturday, and plenty of opportunities to be involved in that.
And Mayor, I do have just quickly, there's an assembly at Washington Elementary on a Friday morning, as well as one at Riverside Elementary, to commemorate the 20-year anniversary since 9/11. And also St. George has reached out and invited us and our heroes to join with them in a celebration at their town square on Saturday morning at 10 a.m.
Thank you. Any other announcements? Any item 3, declaration of abstentions and conflicts? Any to declare this time? I believe Councilman Bundy will be joining us as soon as he can. If not, then we'll move on to item 5, appointment, consideration to appoint a justice court judge. We've been through quite a process. We've had, they changed the program a little bit after we had Judge Segmiller. They changed kind of the procedure. And so we had to form a committee, and they formed the committee, and then the committee, they needed to have a minimum of 3 applicants. We only had 1 applicant for 3 or 4 months. And we finally had a couple of other applicants. They've reviewed the applicants, and it would be my recommendation after reviewing those applicants that we appoint Jake Graff as our Justice Court Judge. He's currently serving now just as a replacement until we have a permanent situation. So I would entertain a motion to support my decision to have Jake Graff be our court judge.
Mayor, I think that's an excellent recommendation, and I'm happy to motion that this council will approve Jake Graff as our justice court judge.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
I do have a motion and a second. We'll do a roll call vote.
Coates, aye.
Mayor, I would just say also as I vote that I had the privilege of living by Jake Graff for many years, and he is an honorable man that will serve our citizens well. Ivy, aye.
Ward, I.
Staley,
All
aye.
right. Councilman Bundy, do you want to vote on that for Jake Graff as our new chief court judge? Jake Graff?
Yes.
All right. Thank you. And with that, I will turn the time to Mayor Pro Tem. I don't
It's
think
not.
Jake should- No, he's not here. So,
Yeah, Mayor, Jake Graff's unavailable tonight. I think he would have attended had
Yeah,
he
he
had he
would've.
been available. And just, thanks to the council and the mayor, the judicial appointment is probably the longest process we have to go through for this type of thing. It's long and arduous, and a number of our staff members have participated within the system that the state courts dictates. City Manager Red sat on a lot of interviews and participated in that process. And so it's a long process. It's nice to get that finalized.
Well, if he had been here, I would have enjoyed having him come forward and at least say hello to the assembled body here. We'll move on to the consent agenda. Item number 4. Item number 4A is the board audit report. Consideration to approve a board audit report for August. Item number B is a approval of the minutes. This is a consideration to approve the minutes from the city council meeting of 8/19 and 8/25, 2021. Item number B, we have 2 final plat amendments. Consideration to approve the final plat for the red trails at at Sunrise Valley. And the consideration to approve item B, consideration to approve the final plat for red trails at Sunrise Valley. And this is their phase 2 location. And item number C, a final plat amendment, consideration to approve the final plat amendment for Payos at Sienna Hills. This is the phase 2 location. And item number CII, consideration to approve the final plat amendment for the Payos at Sienna Hills phase 4. And I will look for any comments on those items.
You mentioned amendment, but these are not amended necessarily.
So,
unless I'm
so
looking-
CI is final plat, CI2 is final plat, and then there's D final plat amendments 1 and D.
So the
2.
CI and CI2 is just.
Yeah, and
plats.
we can have staff go through that, but this was an amendment to the final plat. They were changing the alignment in there for the purpose of, and I read that, but I can't come up with.
They
it.
extended
so
the
it
borders
technically
10
is a
feet.
final.
There you
They
go.
expanded
amendment.
because the mass grading ended up being 10 feet wider. Sitla was okay with it. They came in an agreement, so they were just getting that extra 10
Okay,
feet.
Okay, so it is a plat amendment. I apologize.
Yes.
It doesn't say that here, so.
Yeah, and the applicant is here as well, if you have questions on that.
CII.
If there's no comments.
Let me just ask
Go
one
ahead.
question,
Yeah.
please, before. Drew, was there, you say that Sitla signed off on this. Do they sign property over, or is that something that we even worry about? Is it, you got their verbal that everything was fine on?
Yeah, we actually called them to make sure, and Aaron said, "Oh no, we've talked
Okay.
with Mr. Bellison and worked all that out." So
Okay.
they're aware, and he says, "No, we're totally behind and in conjunction with Mr. Bellison on it."
I'll
So
have to sign the plat as the property owner.
yeah,
So with that, I'll make a motion that we approve the consent agenda as outlined.
I have an item. Do I have a second?
Bundy second.
I have a motion and a second. I'll do a roll call vote. Councilman Staley,
Staley, aye.
Ward, aye.
Ivy, aye.
Coates, aye.
Bundy, aye.
Thank you. That will take us to item number 6. This is a discussion on the local interchange best practices for the economic development director, and we can see Rusty Hughes is coming forward at this time.
Council members, thank you so much for your time tonight. I won't take very much of it. I've actually invited some guests to come. We have Alan Rindlisbacher, who heads up the Community Strategy Department at Economic Development Corporation of Utah, or EDC Utah. And if you remember our last meeting, our work session, I did a very lengthy overview, and we're going to focus now on local incentives. And so I've asked Alan to come here. He has a good perspective because he assists communities all across the state of Utah and works closely with the Governor's Office of Economic Development in the strategy for the state. And then he sees the different community strategies. So it's a good vantage point, and he's just going to give an overview for that.
Rusty, thank you very much. And my privilege to be here with you, council. Thank you very much.
Alan, can you just state your full name for the record?
I will. Alan Rindlisbacher. I am the Director of Community Strategy with the Economic Development Corporation of Utah, also known as EDC Utah.
I think Rusty missed the most important part of your bio though, right? You own a second home in Washington City.
That is correct.
So let's lead with that. You know, he's also a resident.
I am a resident. Yes, I am.
Very nice.
Great.
Welcome home.
That's all happened within the last year. And so I'm another one of those Wasatch fronters who's down here invading your space.
Oh.
But I'm happy to pay my property taxes and help educate children that that are not mine.
Yeah.
Isn't that what it's all about?
Great.
With that said, let's talk a little bit about incentives for a few minutes. This is an interesting topic. I think I've got 7 or 8 slides here, and I'm going to talk for 15, 20 minutes. And if you got some questions, we can address them appropriately. This is the subset of about a 2-hour presentation and a 50-slide deck. We're not going there.
Okay.
But, we'll just talk very briefly tonight about the incentives. Let's move to the next frame. The Economic Development Corporation, and as Rusty would say, and by the way, we're grateful to work with Rusty Hughes and Jeremy as well as your staffers, fabulous, and they're cooperative and interested in understanding what's happening not only in your community, but what's happening statewide and how they can learn from others in this process. And so we truly appreciate our engagement with Jeremy and Rusty. EDC Utah was formed as a private nonprofit corporation in 1987. I remember that day because I was there. I was a much younger man and helped with that, the formation of that private nonprofit corporation to help invigorate economic development in the state of Utah. I was there for a number of years and then left to the private sector and spent 22 years working for a large major commercial contractor in the state of Utah. Maybe you recognize it as Leighton Construction. Retired, and I found my way back to this organization, kind of the old gray-haired guy with a little bit of wisdom and understanding of what we've done in the economic development process.
Recognize that old gray-haired guys have wisdom.
Councilman, I'm with you. Ultimately, we continue on, and what I've seen in the course of the economic development process and incentives over the course of the last 35 years is it's an evolutionary process. Back in the mid 80s, we were all about jobs, jobs, jobs. We just needed to create jobs here in the state because we had too few of them and we were exporting our children out of state. We'd educate them and then send them elsewhere. We needed to give away a few dollars in that incentive process to entice companies to come to the state. But things have changed. So there's that slide as we talk about, we work in cooperation and partnership with Go Utah, the Governor's Office of Economic Development. We're their private sector partner working in that recruitment process. Our business development team is out working trade shows and working with site selectors all over the country, finding opportunities that we can bring home to the state of Utah and create more jobs. Next slide. Part of our process, and the reason I'm here tonight, we have a program called the Development Ready Communities Program. Here's a booklet. Rusty has a copy. We can get that to you electronically as well. But as we work with our communities statewide to help them understand the processes in this economic development world, how we respond to RFIs, how we work with a site selector that's bringing an opportunity to a community. And in essence, we offer this training, and we're doing a training tomorrow virtually with economic development officials throughout the state of Utah, talking about real estate readiness and site preparation and so forth. So there's some of the training that we offer for our members statewide. Next slide. And how to understanding local incentives. Let's go to the next slide. Is how do local incentives impact projects? First of all, if we turn to information from the International Economic Development Council, an economic incentive is simply, as it says on the slide, to induce, incite, or spur action, helping companies, persuading companies to make that final push over the edge to bring jobs, create opportunities in a local community. You can read that grade statement, simply persuading companies, whether it's structures, purchasing equipment, entering new markets. That's the push for incentives. Now, there are professional site selectors that we deal with regularly that represent companies. Their business is to do whatever they can to get the most incentive for their client from the local community. As it says there in the last bullet point, so some $70 billion annually distributed or generated from communities to economic opportunities for companies coming to their local areas. Next slide. What drives the community's incentive philosophy? This is where the rubber hits the road. Is it about jobs? Is it about wages? What's the capital expenditure that a company would be bringing to the community, which enhances your tax base, which is going to ultimately bring more to your community coffers for the needs that you have to run the city of Washington. And then as we look at companies that are looking for those incentives, what is their commitment to the community? Are they coming to this community because they're going to be a valuable corporate citizen, or are they simply looking for something?
Alan, can I add, this just triggered a thought from the St. George Area Chamber held a business convention called Rise
Right.
today. And it was really interesting, but one of the presenters, I wish I could remember who, they talked about, and neither of these facts are a surprise to us, but they talked about the exponential increase in cost of home ownership, right? While homes across the nation have increased in price, it's been about double and then some in this part of Utah. So on the one hand, we have high and increasing high cost of home ownership, but then the next topic they talked about was the challenge of median wages, which, if I recall right, was only 59,000 in our county. And I want to say, high 70s in northern Utah and elsewhere. So it's an interesting dichotomy of the challenge of high cost of home ownership, but you also have the challenge of wages that haven't quite caught up. So as we talk this through and as we work with Rusty, well-paying jobs is something that's on my mind as part of the solution for housing for our next generations.
Absolutely, Councilman. We look at where we were 35 years ago. And again, I said at the beginning, we were looking for jobs, jobs, jobs. Now that should not be the driving force. We should be looking for high-paying jobs, skilled jobs, jobs that pay the wage that are trying to keep up with the housing prices that we're dealing with. There's no question. That's supply and demand of housing. Now that's for another 2-hour discussion, talking about affordable and available housing in the state of Utah, because that's a challenge too, where we're 50, 60,000 housing units short in the state of Utah, and supply and demand drives that, but the wages are not growing incrementally with to keep up. So yes, we need to seek and go after jobs that will pay that wage. And that's part of this incentive philosophy that you're faced with. What are we going to do? What are you going to do to create an incentive philosophy that entices and encourages those types of companies, those types of jobs? I think those are 4 key things. And just like you say, you could add a couple of others based upon what's important to your community. Next. Why a policy? Frankly, I think that you've got to be in a position that you're leading the charge. You're directing that process. You're not waiting for a company to come and simply ask for something to carry them over the finish line. You need to have made those decisions beforehand so that you're negotiating from a position of strength. That the second bullet point, avoiding political problems. You need to have a philosophy that's in place so that your citizens that are sitting here in the audience behind me understand what your philosophy is, that everything's above board on the table and you're doing things for a specific reason because that's the right thing to do for your community. And tied with the third one, what are your priorities, that you're aligning well with the things that are important to you in Washington City? Next. Part of the proactive economic development efforts that you have in your community, first of all, you need to have a solid economic development strategic plan. Where do you want to go? What is your vision? What is your general plan as it relates to your economic growth? All of those things have an impact. If your general plan doesn't allow for the type of industrial development that you would like, then your hands are somewhat tied. If you're going to have to go through changing master plans and zoning to accommodate a company that would maybe come your way. If you've looked ahead, you've created that vision, you're going to be fine. And last of all, the point that we always make is these decisions are made on a case-by-case basis. Every opportunity is going to be somewhat different, and you need to simply be prepared to look at each one of them independently. Next. Nothing more important than partnerships. You're not doing this, you're not creating an incentives policy in a vacuum. It takes every one of those people that are on that list to those organizations that will be part of this discussion and decision-making process. You as cities, you deal with all of those things that we've already talked about zoning and permitting and fees and infrastructure. Talked with an engineer recently that basically said, our economic vitality in the state of Utah is based upon our ability to deliver our infrastructure, water, power, broadband, all of those things you grapple with, roads, transportation, those things you deal with on a regular basis. You have to work in partnership with the county. The school board is absolutely essential in developing an incentives policy because oftentimes they're the organization that gives up the most, sacrifices the most, because I'll tell you, I took a screenshot of my, there it is, you can't see it, but there's a screenshot of my property tax assessment for my home in Washington City. I know exactly how much I'll be paying this year to the school board and to Washington City. They're all important. Every one of those taxing entity partners, even down to the maybe less so the mosquito abatement district, maybe they're not going to have as much to say about your incentives policy, but they ought to be a part of that discussion somewhere because they are your taxing entity partners. Then also you got private sector businesses that are engaged. We utilize and are in conversation on a regular basis with several private sector organizations. I've got listed there. These are the ones that partner with us in our private nonprofit corporation: Lewis Young, Robertson and Birmingham, Smith Hartvigson, Zion's Public Finance. These are organizations that who have the legal expertise and have been doing this for decades, working with communities to help them establish their economic development strategy, strategic plan, as well as incentive policy and directives, setting up CRAs, helping administer and direct the programs with tax increment financing and so forth. Department of Workforce Services, business associations, all of these are your partners as you make decisions about where your economic development strategy goes. Next. The tools. This is the alphabet soup of incentives. Community reinvestment areas, that's the current tool that we that we use by state statute. The state has also instituted transportation reinvestment zones. Now that's an interlocal agreement that you could engage with a county and a couple of other municipalities for the benefit of all in the course of, I'd suggest that we talk about Highway 7 that runs through the city. Maybe that could have utilized more effectively a TRZ. I think that's a tool that was instituted since that freeway or highway's been put into place, but might have served a useful purpose then. Public infrastructure districts is a tool that was instituted, Jeremy, I think a couple of years ago by the legislature. We have a number of private sector entities that are pushing this as a useful resource. Some communities are using it, but it's a relatively new tool, but something you could look at as well. And then the rest of that alphabet soup of special assessment areas and opportunity zones. I was reading this afternoon that the governor's Economic Opportunity Commission is making some major changes to the EdTIF. Governor Cox has suggested that the economic development tax increment financing program that the state of Utah has used for the last 15, 20 years, he suggests is to Wasatch Front heavy, Wasatch Front oriented to businesses that he said that we don't need to incent some of those businesses coming to the Wasatch Front. Let's level the rural playing field. And so you'll continue to see that tool massaged and evolved to the point of benefiting third, fourth, fifth, and sixth class counties more effectively than we've seen in the past. Then there's other Go Utah programs out of the Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity that the READY program, which is the jobs benefit program, and also the RCIC, the Rural Center for, now I forget the acronym, but a couple of other rural programs that benefit our partners statewide in those rural areas. Next. Finding your approach to your incentives. Let me suggest, as I watch the clock too, I decided to print it and it's not on the screen because of confidentiality and I didn't have approval to do so. But this is a 5-page document from Sevier County. The Economic Development Director of Sevier County has consulted with me and he said, give me your input, give me your insights about our 5-page resolution and memorandum of understanding between Sevier County, Richfield City, Salina City, and the school district. Each one of those 4 entities have come together and they've created a statement of entity positions and principles to say, as it relates to economic incentives, what's our position? What are our points of interest? What are our points of concern? Each one of the school district and each of those cities have put together that framework so that they all understand where each are coming from. There are no surprises. They've been able to look to say, okay, the school board, this is what we want out of it. This is what we'd expect as we partner with you, the cities and the county. Then even in the document, they have some definitions, breaking out the definition of what is tax increment financing so that there's no question that they all agree. Let me just read that. A public financing tool that is used as a subsidy for redevelopment by diverting a portion of tax revenue to help finance development and incentivize private development for project areas within a county or municipal jurisdiction. Project areas are created by municipal city redevelopment agencies through the adoption of an ordinance or resolution by the local governing body or city council. Okay, everybody's clear about what tax increment financing means, that there's no uncertainty. And then a number of other terms that they've described, but ultimately a document that the players then in that county have simply said, this is what we need to do as we go forward with our tax increment finance, our incentives approach. Next slide. This is a simple statement of, again, case by case. By the time you go through that process, you've determined what's important to you. And then you come up with the concept of for projects that are in the community, and what is the range, how many years, and what percentage of our tax increment are we going to give up on this project based upon the benefit that's going to return to us. Next. And a lot the same, creating those explicit directives about what you'll offer. Next slide. We've developed a matrix at EDC Utah that's doesn't have all the answers, but it's instead of just guessing, we've put some quantifiable numbers to it. Jobs, wages. And this is just a sample of one that we put together that, okay, the wages of a particular business is $60,000 a year. The county average wage is 43. So the percentage of that county average wage is 137% of our local community average wages. So you have some numbers to compare. Go to the next slide. As you then put them on this matrix, and I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time, let's go to the one on the right that would suggest the number of jobs that are being created at 250. That's the green dot. It also corresponds on the horizontal axis with 137% of the county average wage. In essence, it falls within the green box of a potential go deal. You look at the red box up in the corner, this particular community does not want an employer bringing 325 or 375 or 400 jobs because they don't have the number of employees to meet that need. And also, if it was in that red box paying only 100% or the average wage in the community, why would you incent a company to come that isn't paying higher wages? And you're also creating too many jobs that you can't take care of in your local community anyway, simply because of the size of the community. So the red box is a no-go. There's no reason to even consider that company if it were in that range. The yellow's obviously caution. You'd look at those in a different way, but obviously the one at case in hand here, 137% above average wages, and a number of jobs that would be suitable for the community, it might work. So we create that matrix that has some quantifiable numbers to it, and we could spend some more time with it, but we will not. Gives you at least a snapshot. Next slide, and I think we're about done. Skip on past that one. What site selectors have to say, and I end with this. Some of those folks that we deal with on a national perspective, the site selectors simply have said incentives won't go away. It's something that will continue as communities across the state seek to entice companies to come their way. It should be a final benefit to make the project successful. We often use the term, but for this project, or but for this incentive, would this deal get done? That ought to be the sweetener, the icing on the cake, the thing that makes the difference to make a development deal happen. Beware of any project that on the first page of the RFI, they ask for incentives. If that's what they're asking for, we don't want them. They need to be here for a different reason than that. And then last of all, the lowest cost, most always, is not the decision maker. It ought not be about money. It ought to be about landing in Washington City, because this is the right place.
Can you tell me about number one, the top one again? Incentives
Won't go away. The competition in the United States of America will continue such that we will have to continue to deal with communities, states that are offering incentives to bring economic development to their communities. I was going to write a book once about incentives, the next civil war. That as
Yeah.
we continue, I could, part of another 2-hour training session, we talk about some of the big manufacturing projects that have happened in recent decades. Mercedes-Benz plants, BMW plants going to the Southwest, where millions and millions of dollars were given away to generate those jobs for those communities. It's a high stakes game. And
And then I suspect that item number 2 is more of a gut feel and just knowing the industry and relying on your partners and making sure that you know exactly what your offer looks like to make sure that that really is just the sweetener on top.
absolutely. Yep. But for what we're doing to help take this over the edge.
Do you think of any other things that we can do to make sure that that is just the final benefit that puts it over the line?
No, in my mind, that's the teller. That's the telltale decision that we have to make, making sure that you as a council, you as a city leadership are firm and understanding that what you're doing based upon some of those other elements of the matrix, if you wanted to use something like that to put some quantifiable numbers to it, what's the benefit that's coming to the community? Does it have value?
Okay, thank you.
Other questions?
How common is it to have a developer ask for maybe 2 different types of incentives? Is that a common practice, or maybe they come in and ask for a PID and a CRA?
Depending upon what, yeah, it could go a number of different directions. If they're familiar with the process and they've utilized a PID somewhere else, public infrastructure district, that it's worked well for them, well, they'd maybe want to explore that. Is there a basic tax increment financing deal where they're telling you they're going to bring X number of millions of dollars of capital investment to the community, and that's going to increase the value of that particular property, and that's going to generate X number of dollars of taxes? Been working on a project with Ephraim City that's done just that, determining the dollar increase in taxes, and then what's that percentage that the city would give to benefit
Or jobs or whatever.
help that
the goal may
development come
be.
along to actually happen, that ultimately will benefit the community. So it's usually doing some basic math to make those decisions. Thanks for your time, and we'd be happy to come down anytime. Jeremy, Rusty, continue to work with you and help refine some of these processes. Thanks for your time.
Okay, and so currently we're using you as a resource to, well, I guess I have Rusty answer that is.
So I've worked with EDC Utah for a number of years now, and they're a great resource. They provide trainings. We've done community surveys with them. They provide access to their resources, both on the private and the public side. They're a great connection to the state of Utah. They help with policy. There are so many things that they've been helpful with. I probably left out a few, but they're a really great resource for us. And we do have a membership with them. It's good until January of next year. And we have some documents that they've produced that they do on an annual basis that help us with our focus. And I wouldn't, since I'm newer here, I didn't engage with them before, but we do have a retail profile. We have a community profile. So I'll get those out to the council, which is working through a few adjustments that need to be made to the data on that. So I'll get those for you to review.
And we're currently in the process of developing this full incentives philosophy, or you're feeling like we're kind of just putting the final bits of that together at this point?
Well, the general idea, ideally, we would like to do a strategic plan that involves all of those partners and a lot of different components, including residents from the area, to decide what it is we want, how we want to direct development, commercial development in the city. And then we would put in an incentive plan that that encourages that type of development, whether it's jobs driven, cities, get revenue from retail. High ticket retail is a good example. So we have a few projects right now. So we're kind of putting the cart before the horse with that, with some of the current projects that are already upon us. But the idea is that we put together a plan that's long term, and we stick to that plan, but it has to have enough flexibility to move with the market as the market changes, as we've seen it change. So we do have a strategic plan in the city of Washington. It was put together, I think, in 2015. It was a 5-year plan. So we're right around the time where we need to be doing another one. So that's the idea, but we want to get the council up to speed on all the changes that have been made, and then also what opportunities there are. And so I've done some initial assessments, but we'll want to go through a process similar to the general plan and in conjunction with the general plan, because planning and zoning is a big part of it, and that's the city's part of it. So we have to decide what it is we want. That's a very collaborative thing. And then we structure incentives to go along with that.
Okay, so we're going to be doing both long-term planning and short-term incentive work as well, because we can't stop the economy of Washington City, obviously, to wait for us to put together a long-term plan. Is that so we're kind of doing, you say cart before the horse, we're kind of doing the cart and the horse, or we're
Yes,
building the
we're moving
bicycle as we ride
sideways
it.
with
or
both
some
of them
those
moving
things.
forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we, as your partners on the sideline, offering whatever help we can and encouragement and observations about the great things that are happening here. And we appreciate working with you.
Great. Council, any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you for the presentation. Thank you for your time. Okay, we will move on to item number 7. This is item number 7A, consideration to approve the preliminary plat Lakeside at Stookie Farms. And I think, Eldon, are we looking to you for this item? Great.
Thanks, Mayor Pro Tem. The applicant is requesting approval of a preliminary plat for the Lakeside at Stookie Farms subdivision located at Stookie Farms Parkway and Waters Edge Way. This preliminary plat was previously approved back on December 11th of 2019, but has since expired, and the applicant is now ready to proceed at this time. The applicant is proposing 44 lots on an area covering 19.527 acres. The zoning designation at this particular location, along with the surrounding area, is planned community development. The proposed subdivision conforms to the approved zoning. The request meets the subdivision requirements and other city ordinances as it relates to this location. Staff has reviewed the request and recommends approval with conditions of the preliminary plat as outlined. And as previously approved, they did add 5 lots, I think 39 through 41, which is an addition from what you previously approved.
And that was an approval for it, but then it expired.
Correct.
So tell me again, what's the time limit on them moving forward on that?
They have 1 year to record the final plat before it expires.
So Eldon, I remember looking at this back then, and we added that access between lot 31 and 32 at that time. And it had to do with the lake. So is the lake a part of this proposal? Because I think we heard back then from people's concern is that one of the lakes going to be built as part of the development. So I'm asking, is this lake part of this preliminary plat or not?
It is part of the preliminary plat. As far as timeline, I would have to let the applicant speak to that.
Okay. Is the applicant here? I don't see. Oh, Brandy's online. Okay. Well, when we can ask that. And then the other question I had was the LID, because in 2019, we didn't have LID requirements. Now we do. What's the plan? And I think we can ask the applicant on that as well, moving forward with that LID.
Eldon, what does this do to the densities? Does it change? Is it just negligible or?
It stays the same.
And maybe you mentioned this and I didn't hear it. Why did it expire? Just they just weren't ready to proceed? Is that what I understand?
They didn't record the final plat within the 1 year time frame. Everything was approved. It just lapsed the time frame.
Is it built? Or is they still under construction on this parcel?
I would have to defer to the applicant on that. I haven't seen the site.
Brandy, if you're online, can you maybe answer that question for us?
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, there's quite a few, sorry. As far as is it built, phase one is wrapping up right now with construction. They do have a grading permit on the other future phases. So if you were to visit the site, you would see that the bulk of the development is graded, but right now subdivision improvements are underway for just phase one. So that's the final plat that's trying to record.
Okay. And Brandy, just for the record, can I have you state your full name?
Oh yeah, sorry, Brandy Walker with Civil Science.
I know we know you, but thank you.
So,
And then
Brandy,
regards to construction of, oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead. If you know my questions, I just wanted to repeat them if you didn't hear them or not. So one was the LID component with this plan changing. I'm just curious where you're at with that.
So the lake will cover the bulk of the LID due to the size of it. There's detention basins already installed that are over capacity as well, but we're going to design the lake as such that it will work for LID. They're designing some open space that you can see along this plat that will be lowered per se, like there's a trail going through it where we can do drainage swells within the landscape as well. It sits between Crossroads and this development. The big hatch area. So yes, we have provided the LID to Public Works.
And then about fill in the lake, do we have a time frame? Is that just part of the construction?
It's well under design right now. So it is, we're hoping this development there at least the lots adjacent to it. I know that was a concern last time. Like I said, we're grading everything now. So the lake is actually being graded in right now. The final design elements of the lake are still under review and has not been fully approved by the city. But it is being constructed.
Randy, this is Councilman Ivy. Where are we at on the preliminary geotechnical study on this?
We don't have a preliminary, but we actually have a very full in-depth study. This development required a lot of extra work by AGEC and a lot of extra oversight due to the lake vicinity to this development. Public Works actually required that we put on our grading permit plans a special note referring to the geotech. And so they have been on site monitoring, testing, and watching with extra special care on this one.
And then we can expect a final geotechnical report at some point, correct?
Correct. Yes, that's required at completion. AGEC is the geotech on this one. They've been heavily involved. It's involved pre-wedding, so we've actually had to go out, survey, collect, all that good stuff and required mapping for AGEC. So lots of geotechnical oversight on this guy.
So Brandy,
I know you're, go ahead.
I just had another question, went back to the LID. So the idea of the approach of using the reservoirs as the LID retention, that is acceptable by the Public Works Department, that concept?
Yeah, it has been in past. What we do is we put we raise the outlet, lower the basin technically so that there would be a retention factor in there before it actually fills to the point that it would outlet the system.
And correct, you are always going to use the lake as stormwater drainage, correct? That was part of
so the lake's dual purpose. Yeah.
Wait, so how much resizing and modifications did you have to do to comply with the new LID requirements?
Not much at all, since this lake is absolutely ginormous and has a ton of capacity, because this lake will hold water all the time, but then in a storm event, we'll have the ability to raise to storm levels without overtopping still. So the surface area on this lake is huge.
So Randy, is ginormous engineering term?
Yes, that's a very technical term. It's big. This is on the city's radar for capital facilities. So Public Works will have a lot of involvement in how they take it over, and yeah.
I believe in the engineering handbook, it says that it is a technical term, but it's generally used for presentations in city councils.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Sorry, I'm not in person, so a little casual. Sorry.
that's great. You're doing a great job. And I know this was previously approved and then it expired. But the timing of the expiration really coincided with the drought. It seems like we've talked about almost nothing but water since then. Have you had any thoughts about relooking at the lake there? Or possibly.
I'm
I know
glad Lexi
that's-
brought that up. So Stuckey Farms has lots of active. Well, there's 2 that are active, I believe, right now with the ability. I think there's 4 total active wells on site. So that lake will actually be used with Stuckey Farms water rights to their wells. So it will not be filled with culinary water. In fact, I don't know if Mike Shaw is in the room. He can even address the matter a little bit further, but they're looking at utilizing the system to actually start putting a secondary system through Stuckey Farm in works via the well water use there.
Right.
So the turf farms you see out at Stuckey Farms are being watered by the well. In fact, the park up in the meadows is being watered by well. It's not coming off the city's culinary systems.
No, I recognize that and remember that. And I actually remember right, you're actually doing the water is quite brackish and you're using a unique treatment in order to even make it usable. Is that right?
Yeah, we'll recycle it through and so really we say a lake, but it'll be 2 lakes and it'll waterfall between and cycle through.
I think that's an important thing to mention to our citizens that may be listening, is that Stuckey Farm, with that brackish water, it provides basically their own water source for that. So,
Although I don't know that that's not going to be enough to be for them to have some criticism in the future, especially as some of these water regulations and get implemented throughout the area. So,
yeah.
Council, any other questions?
Not really a question, but just a point that the very reason that we have the 1 year, Mr. Ellerman or any other staff members, the reason that we have that is for a change in things such as LID or other things that might come along in that year period that then allows the city to incorporate those things into the requirements. And so I just want to make that point, that that's the very essence of the timeline on the.
I'll just add to that, it's that vesting principle that Councilman Bundy's talking about. Sometimes you won't have that and then they come and change, then you can get that implemented in because they haven't finished. So then you're able to add those to that if a change comes. And so that's why we put those limits on. So it's just not drug out indefinitely. And so we can get those.
They have the
criteria
option to
for-
extend, correct? But
Yes,
there's a
there
limit-
is.
But there's a limit on that as well.
There's a limit on that. They can get a 6 month from staff.
Yeah.
And then if they want an extra 6 months, they can for the commission and council to get that. So, technically you can take up to 4 years to get a plat recorded. That's a pretty long time.
So
So
we missed that and we're basically looking for a new.
correct. Yeah. They missed it quite a bit, and that's okay. They had other things going on.
Yeah.
As well. Other, subdivisions took a little more preference or precedence that were up to the north of it. So it's just a decision they had to make. So.
So
You know,
this issue of there being a time frame is, I don't want to say it's recent, but in terms of the history of, local government, it's fairly recent. And some of the more interesting disputes occurred at times when there weren't time limits. And some things would take, decades to ever come about, and they would still make claims to, vested rights.
Yeah.
From a decision that was made by a city council, 35 years ago. And so
None of whom are still alive.
and our city's a good example. 30 years is a vast change in your circumstances. And the other thing for the staff is it's nice to have a system that something can't just sit there indefinitely. They have a process, they want to get them in, get them through. But if it doesn't get through, there's also a back door eventually.
Well, the nice thing is it hits a relatively short agenda item too.
Speaking of that, Mayor Pro Tem, we will make a motion if you're ready for one.
I would entertain a motion. Thank you, Councilman.
I'll make a motion to approve a preliminary plat lakeside at Stuckey Farms located approximately Stuckey Farms Parkway and Waters Edge Way.
Thank you, Councilman Ivy.
Bundy, second.
I have a motion and a second. Roll call vote. Councilman Bundy.
Bundy, aye.
Coates, aye.
Ivy, aye.
Ward, aye.
Staley, aye.
Thank you. Item number 8, an award bid. This is a consideration to approve an award of a contract for equipment for Grapevine Wells is it number 3 through 6 or is it number 3 and 6? It's 3 through 6.
3 through
right?
6.
Mike Shaw.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, Council. This is for the equipping of our wells that were previously drilled. If council remembers, they actually approved a bid a month ago. And that was putting in the infrastructure, the vaults and different piping for the wells. This will be equipping the wells and the electronic equipment that goes along with it. We put this out for proposals. We got 2 proposals in. One from Peterson Brothers Drilling and the other one from I forget their name. Zimmerman Well Service. And the Zimmerman Well Service, their proposal came in better than the Peterson Brothers Drilling. So we're requesting that you award this bid in the amount of $390,849.90 to Zimmerman Well Services.
Mike, how close is the electricity to this? Is it nearby? It runs in my mind.
It
that
runs
it's
right up the road. We
Yes.
previously drilled well number 2, had the piping in, the power in for that well, thinking that we're going to be a larger well. It only came in at 120 gallons a minute. So we actually came in and drilled these wells going after that 100 gallon a minute. We did quite a bit better. We're going to be producing around 600, 650 out of those 4 wells. But all the infrastructure that's there, the piping, the power, we've had to buy some transformers, but all the main power is there.
But with that yield in 4 wells, that's better than we expected.
Much better. Yep. About 200 gallons a minute more than we expected.
So just for clarity, council, the name is used in 2 different formats in the materials. In the matrix, it's Z Team Drillers. And then in the letter from Sunrise Engineering, it's Mike Zimmerman Well Service. I think you're referring anything that Zimmerman is the same entity, and the proposal is, or the request is that the council award the bid to that entity.
The Z Team.
Z Team Drillers is the same thing as Mike Zimmerman Well Drillers. We're referring to the same proposal.
Is there one you prefer over another?
But technically, the Z Team is their company name, right?
Those, he's saying that those 2 are the same. The other
Thanks.
competing
Yeah.
bid is Peterson Boss Drilling.
Yeah.
Are we at a place where we can put the decision matrix up on the screen?
Steve, can you adjust the screen to take in my computer? Thank you, kind sir.
So is the decision matrix, is that something you usually use on those? I mean, it looks like you had some outside consulting on there, a couple of different, because you had some considerations that were really well laid out. I actually really like the decision matrix, but I wonder if you just maybe talk to its utilization and for this project.
It's not a standard. When we put out a bid, we put out a bid on very specific items. This one was not a very specific project. It was leaving a lot up to the companies to determine what type of equipment, manufacturers of equipment. So when we put out a proposal like this, it's not an actual bid, it's a request for proposals. When we do a request for proposals, then we will develop a matrix like this, go through, score them, try to pick the best person for the job based off the metrics.
And was it the lowest bid that also came in? It was, correct?
It was.
Yeah.
Are these two companies local, Mike, you know?
Neither one are local. They're Utah companies, but northern Utah.
You didn't recognize them, but
Might be a little tough to make a full-time living drilling here in the.
Well, I
desert.
think they've got the Peterson bosses wrong. I think it's Peterson Brothers. We've used them for a long time doing our repairs and maintenance on our wells. Very, very comparable company.
Mayor Pro Tem, if there's no further discussion.
No, I was just gonna say, I enjoyed the matrix and I thank Mike for his time kind of walking through that and explaining a little more about it. So yeah, we look for a motion.
A motion that this council approve the Grapevine Pass wash well equipping number 3 through number 6. That RFP goes to Mike Zimmerman Well Service LC in the amount of $390,849.90.
Second by Coates.
You know, it's a bid, word of a bid, right? He mentioned
We award the
RFP,
bid. It came in as an RFP.
Yeah, it's.
but
yeah,
we're awarding the bid, right?
awarding the bid.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll look for a vote there. Councilman Staley.
Daily, aye.
Ward, aye.
IVI.
Coates, aye.
Bundy, aye.
Mr. Shaw, I think you're going to stay here with us for the next item, item number 9A, consideration to approve property acquisition agreement for the Grapevine Wells. I'll turn the
Thank you.
time back over to you, Mr. Shaw. Mike.
So this is for the same sites. This is the actual well sites that we've drilled the wells on. This is for acquiring the property for those well sites from Sitla. You have in your packet the purchase agreement. The total price for the purchase of the property is $4,648, and that's for a total of 0.332 acres for all 4 sites. And the sites are 0.083 acres per site.
And we already have access to those sites through, because they're on roads that are, they're located near roads where we already have access to other wells.
They're right along the existing road that goes to well number 2. So they're right adjacent to the roadway.
So no issues that way.
No.
There's no other discussion. I move that we approve the property acquisition for the Grapevine Wells as presented.
Thank you,
If I
Councilman
may,
Bundy.
before any vote, just wanted to state on the record, the purchase price for the land is in section 1B is $4,406 or $648. So that's the price that you'd be approving. Then there's a few places that have been left blank in the document provided to you that I've worked with Lester we've completed those. Just in general, there will be no escrow through the title company. It'll just be a check and a patent transaction. Also, there will be no closing fees or taxes that we're being required to pay to Sitla as part of this. And so it's a fairly small transaction, but critical to our well development plan.
Do we need to have Councilman Bundy include that dollar amount in his motion?
No, he's mentioned, I just wanted to make sure that you guys had all seen the dollar amount and felt like you'd been made aware of that.
I'll go ahead and second the motion and include the amount of $4,648 for the acquisition of property from Sitla.
We also are trying to establish a per acre value here. So just a little bit of a joke there because it's, we are getting some land and that pretty good price if we could extrapolate it to all the land available.
Yeah, 14,000 is a good deal.
Yeah. We'll swing this contract at them on our next acquisition.
I think they'll try to add at least 1 0, maybe 2.
Okay. Any other comments on the motion that's before us?
No.
Okay, and we're okay with you're okay with the way the motion was made? And okay.
Yeah, mostly I commented so that just to make sure you'd seen that paragraph with the purchase price so that was part of your awareness.
Thank you. Roll call vote, Councilman Bundy.
Bundy, aye.
Coates, aye.
IVI.
Ward, aye.
Daily, aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike Shaw. Okay, item number 10, report from officers of assigned committees. Start with-
Mayor Pro Tem, I do have an item. We are having Legislative Policy Committee meeting in Salt Lake City this Monday. They have been holding those throughout the year for different reasons and purposes. There is talk of some legislative agenda items that are going to be discussed there. If the council or anyone has any specific questions that you'd like me to ask while I'm there on any of that information regarding the upcoming legislative session, please reach out and I will do my best to get us answers. But it will be on Monday at noon. If you're ever in Salt Lake, come join me.
You know, interesting, the news is starting to kind of set the tone for the upcoming session. There was a big article today about the death penalty, which is a really interesting discussion for our state. But yeah, the session's in its pre-session phase at this point.
And there is, and we know of some items that we anticipate being on, this year on this session that several are very motivated about, and some building legislation, different things like that. So I will do my best to keep us surprised. Thank you.
Always fun to watch the state legislature and chew on your nails while they're making decisions up there. Thank you.
So I was going to mention, you have to help me out here, Councilman Ward, on the Flood Control Authority. Just want to mention that how beneficial that group is. We had our 5-year plan. This was yesterday, yeah. And the amount of money that because we work with Santa Clara and St. George and kind of combine our funds and use those funds to leverage to get other funding with federal and state, that it's been huge beneficial to our whole communities. What was it? Was it $25 million that we've received? And
Yeah, I don't have the numbers on top of my head that way, but basically the money that is being put in by the cities into that flood control authority to maintain those waterways in cases of floods, make sure they're clear and avoid disasters. We're getting a 10-to-1 return, not a return on those, but they're seeking for added funds through state and other federal agencies, as well as other private partners.
But basically every dollar we put in, we get 10 from
Yeah.
other agencies to help with this flood mitigation on projects along our main rivers, watersheds.
Yeah, extremely impressive cooperation between the cities that participate in that, and interesting process. Thank you, Councilman. Anything else?
I'm assigned to the mosquito abatement district as a representative of Washington City. And I just have here kind of the budget, just for interest of the council's sake. I wouldn't expect everyone to get into all the numbers, but it gives an idea of what the mosquito abatement revenue is all about and the expenses and how much it costs as we're participating in that. So there's 2 sheets here that if you each take one, like, again, just read through it so you're aware of. Mosquito abatement was
I
announced.
usually keep track of exactly how many mosquito bites they get
Mosquitoes,
every
yeah,
year, and
they
I'm
do.
on exactly
It's
0
quite
this
amazing,
year.
actually.
It really is.
One thing I might mention is that-
Especially when you think of, sorry to interrupt you, but especially when you think of that was one of the big plagues that was with the original settlers was the mosquitoes that were here. Yeah.
well, and one of the things they're looking for any diseases that they might carry, and they're what's the one, the West Nile virus. The last meeting, it wasn't reported in the mosquitoes that they trapped. So just so everyone's aware of that. But now there's another mosquito that is a big carrier of diseases that they found in Springdale, which they are working a little more specifically on that. I could try to read the technical name, but I probably wouldn't even.
The technical name of the disease or the
No,
mosquito?
the mosquito.
Oh.
But it carries diseases quite easily, and carries that to others. So they're watching that closely.
Great. Thank you for your work there. Any others from the council? Councilman Staley? Okay. We'll turn to item number 11, city manager report.
Trying very hard not to be offended that half the audience left just before my turn.
I kind of thought it was my comment about complimenting the mosquitoes, but you can take that as an insult.
Start talking mosquitoes, all the kids leave, but I'm sure on YouTube, there are still thousands stuck
Yes,
to their
yes.
computers and TVs. I do have a couple of really exciting things to report. I know the council's already aware, but want to make the community aware. Our police chief, Jason Williams, has been recognized as one of the top 40 under 40 police chiefs of police by the International Chiefs of Police Association. So that's a prestigious national award that went to our police chief, much deserved for Chief Williams. And he turns 40 next year. So this was his.
He's going to age out.
He's going to age out of the award, but it was much deserved. We'll be announcing this and promoting it a little bit in our newsletter and different things. So congratulations to Chief Williams. Also, in the most recent Utah Recreation and Parks Association meetings, Washington City received the award for Innovation of the Year for the Canyon Park and Hellhole Trailhead. So that was before I came to work here, but many of you were instrumental helping with that. And also Barry Blake and the Parks Group. So that's an award for the city for that trailhead and park. So I think it's, we know we have fantastic employees who do great work. It's nice to see other people also recognize them and the work that they do.
That is nice to have your potential bias confirmed.
That's
'Cause
right.
we've
That's right.
always thought that they were great folks.
Yeah. They're not even awards we gave ourselves, so it's
Right.
fantastic. The one other thing I would mention that you don't know about, we did receive the Green Spring PCD submittal. So we talked about that a few months ago and went through a timeline. One of the things I think was really helpful when we first presented this was to have a joint meeting with the council and the planning commission. So I'd really like support to do another meeting of that variety to kind of go through and show that to everybody up front and see if we can get any issues out on the table at the beginning of the process. So it goes a little smoother than the last PCD.
And you're recommending a joint council and
Yes.
planning commission?
I would see us maybe putting some tables out here, having a more informal process, maybe bring in dinner and meet.
Would that be a fifth Wednesday or would that be?
So the date I was looking at was Thursday, the 23rd of September. That fifth Wednesday is the same as League of Cities and Towns. So it wouldn't work. So it would be 2 weeks from tonight would be council meeting. And then the Thursday is what I'm
Do you
proposing.
have a time that you're looking at?
The time could be negotiable depending on what you're looking at, but I would think maybe 5 o'clock.
What's that date again, please?
Thursday, September 23rd. I'll go ahead and send out an email to everybody and see if that works for you. If you have any.
Thursdays have been good in the past.
Or Thursday is good for you. Okay. So that'll kind of get the kickstart for that PCD that has been turned in and then we'll put together a timeline and start working our way through it. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, City Manager. We have a closed session that we'll need to adjourn to. So I'll be looking for a motion to close us into a closed session.
I move that we close this meeting and go into the closed session for the discussion of purchase, exchange, or lease of property.
Thank you, Councilman Bundy.
Second.
Thank you, Councilman Coates. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you.